I did. It is scary.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the quarterly board meeting of the River District. The first thing we're going to take is introductions and any public comment. Also, ask folks if you could to sign the guest register out front. We need some evidence that you were here, some proof for the future when somebody says, "Well, we think you were doing something else that day." They know I signed in there. So, if we could start from the back corner over there and just introduce yourself and who you're with and why.
Hi, I'm Cliff Thompson, provider IKS Consulting and Communications and Issues Campaign.
Okay.
Scott Hummer, Water Division Lot 6.
What do you mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Whoops, sorry.
Maria Pastore, Colorado Springs Utilities. Diane Johnson, Eagle River Water and Sanitation District.
Orla Bannon, Western Resource Advocates.
Drew Peternell with Trout Unlimited.
Eric Kuhn, guest.
And Ted Kowalski introduced himself in a minute.
Ted Kowalski.
We just had
Heather.
and Heather.
Heather Sackett, Aspen Journalism.
Okay. And we just had someone else wander in. Excuse me. Say hi to everybody.
Hi, I'm Sarah Porterfield. I'm a Water Policy Associate with Trout Unlimited.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Does anybody wish to make a comment on an item not on the agenda before we start? Or here to observe and to see what's going on. Thank you very much. Okay, Peter, if we could return to the General Counsel report.
Thank you, Mr. President. During the executive session portion of the River District's board meeting today, the board received advice from council and discussed and provided direction to staff and council on the items listed under Agenda 7A. I would note for the record that President Merritt was not present for the discussion of item 7A, Romanet 1. There were several items that staff had proposed that the board consider for action. And if it was acceptable to the board, we would make those recommendations for formal action at this time. I'll turn to Jason for the bulk of that.
Okay, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. The first recommended action would be we recommend that the board confirm its intent to maintain the conditional portion of the West Divide project water rights and direct staff to take the steps necessary to complete the appropriation in a reasonably expedient and efficient manner consistent with Colorado law. We would further recommend that the board direct council and staff in consultation with the West Divide Water Conservancy District to file an application seeking a finding of reasonable diligence for the conditional portions of the West Divide project water rights.
We have a staff recommendation. Is there a motion? Moved. Motion by Alvey.
Second.
Second by Winery. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank
Next,
you.
sir.
The next would be the Wolford Mountain Reservoir refill right. We recommend that the board confirm its intent to maintain the conditional portion of the Wolford Mountain Reservoir refill water right, direct staff to take the steps necessary to complete the appropriation in a reasonably expedient and efficient manner consistent with Colorado law. We would further recommend that the board direct council and staff to file an application seeking a finding of reasonable diligence for the conditional portion of the Wolford Mountain Reservoir refill water right.
We have staff recommendation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Akropeska.
Second.
Second by Hazard. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
The next issue we wanted to talk with you about is in the our attorney report, and it's the application we filed in the City of North Glen case. That's case number 18 CW 3159. The City of North Glen filed a augmentation plan. As part of that application, they listed the Berthoud Pass Ditch and Tunnel as a source of augmentation water. That's a trans-mountain diversion in Grand County. We questioned the City of North Glen about whether that water rate had in fact been decreed for augmentation purposes. After a number of conversations, they decided to pull it out of their application. and remove it altogether, which has resolved our issues in that case. There was a proposed stipulation that was included as attachment A to the report, and we would recommend that the board authorize council to enter into a stipulation with the City of North Glen in case number 18 CW 3159 in Water Division 1, consistent with the terms of the stipulation included with your board materials.
Thank you. We have a staff recommendation. Is there a motion?
Monger?
Motion by Munger, second.
Second.
Second by Winery. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank you. And the last item I have today is a approval of special counsel rate increases. Pursuant to your policies, all special counsel for the River District need to be approved by the board, as well as their rates. We have seen a couple of increases this year. Carl Coomley of Dietz and Davis has proposed an increase of $15 per hour. This is the first time Mr. Coomley's raised his rate in 2 years. And Associated Carp New Hanlon that we are working with on matters has proposed to increase her rate to $210 per hour. All of the other members of that firm will continue to provide River District services for $235 an hour. And then our special counsel in Utah that was working on the watercourse resources issues for us has proposed an increase of $10 per hour to $300 per hour. Just a reminder, the fees for that work have been split evenly between the River District and the Upper Yampa District.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wants to go on record proposing increases for the general attorneys? No, we need a motion for staff recommendation.
So moved.
Motion by Stegemeyer. Is there a second? Second. Second by Vanderbrink. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you, sir.
The only other item on your agenda for discussion, if you wish, is the general counsel goals and objectives. Followed the format that have historically and updated that based on feedback from the board at the October annual review evaluation. And I'm going to try to reduce the overall number of goals and objectives so they don't get too out of hand. And so when we talk about it again, either mid-year or in October, I'm going to try to shrink those without shrinking my duties, of course, but prioritize a little bit more. If there are any questions, happy to discuss about that or anything else in the general counsel public report.
I was only wondering what you're going to be doing at night.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. I think that concludes the discussion of the presentation by General Counsel on the report. I think we're ready to move on to Mr. Kowalski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the River District Board. I really appreciate you allowing me a little bit of time in a way that I hope will lead to a discussion, not just for the next little bit, but over the next several years, to be sure. And it feels a little bit like old home week. I went to law school with Andy Mueller, and I've known Peter Fleming for many years. I started off my career at the Attorney General's office with Director Whitmore, and have worked with a variety, a number of you in a variety of different ways back when I was at the state of Colorado, first at the Attorney General's office and then later at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. For almost 4 years now, I've been associated with the Walton Family Foundation, and I lead their Colorado River work, and I want to talk a little bit about what that's about, but I think it's important first to just help explain who the Waltons are and what they're doing, generally in the philanthropic world. And I'm sure many of you know Walmart was established by Sam and Helen Walton many years ago, and they established the Walton Family Foundation almost 30 years ago, a little more than 30 years ago, because they felt that it was important for their family to give and to do their philanthropic work together as a family. And they started first working in K-12 education. They had a strong belief that opportunity is critical to creating the world that they wanted to see and we want to see. And K-12 education is still a vital part of where we do some of our philanthropic giving. We support organizations like Teach for America, and we support a lot of school choice to give kids opportunities. And really, it's born in the premise that every child deserves a great education. They also have a program where they focus, it's a more place-based program where they focus on northwestern Arkansas. They grew up and Walmart was born in the northwestern sort of rural small town of Bentonville, Arkansas, and they give back to that community through cultural resources, through a variety of different philanthropic interests, trying to provide opportunities for people within that community. And the third area is the area I work in, is the environment program, and we focus on a few different geographies, and I'll talk about those here in a second. But I think Helen Walton had this saying that the kids and the grandkids and now the great kids sort of repeat time and time again, and it's not here it is. It's not what you gather, but what you scatter that tells you what kind of life you have lived. And I think we try to live that every day, and we try to use the resources that we have available to us to make this world a better place. And we're trying to do that here in the Colorado River Basin, and we would hope that we can do that alongside with partners like the River District and the people that each of the directors represents within the state of Colorado. I hope this will be a discussion. I did put together a few slides just to sort of tease out a few points that I think we have in common, and I'm welcome questions or comments sort of as I go through it, or in the end, or both. So I know you're not a shy lot, especially you, Director Aquafresca. No. So here at the Walton Family Foundation, we believe that conservation solutions that make economic sense stand the test of time, and we fundamentally reject that it is the environment or the economy, but rather a healthy environment and a healthy economy can go hand in hand. And I think that premise or that sort of underlying theme will resonate through the work that we do. But I also want to underscore that we do not have all the answers to all the questions. I think we are just one player in this very large system, this very large basin that's trying to leave a better Colorado River Basin for our kids and our grandkids. And and this is one way in which we try to do that. And we do it try to create partnerships, and we work with businesses, we work with agricultural communities, we work with farmers and ranchers, conservation interests. We do work with the basin states, and we are a basin-wide program. We work throughout the entire Colorado River Basin, not just here in Colorado and Wyoming and the headwaters, but all the way down through the lower basin and into Mexico. And in each of those areas, we're trying to build partnerships, both ourselves and through our grants and our grantees that we work very closely with. I did mention that we have a number of programs in the environmental area. So you can see the Colorado River Basin there in the yellow. And then we also have a Mississippi River program where we work in the upper Mississippi River, working on trying to improve water quality through different agricultural practices, working with farmers and ranchers to reduce this nutrient loading by cover crops and no-tillage practices and the like. We also work all the way down into the coastal Louisiana, where in the face of climate change, we're facing remarkable land loss. And so we work with that community, with the Louisiana community, to see what we can do to help improve wetlands and make sure that that those communities are protected into the future. We also have an oceans program, and I didn't put this up on the map, where we focus more on sustainable fisheries, and we work closely with fishermen and fisherwomen in Indonesia and Chile and Peru and Mexico, trying to ensure sustainable fisheries, both for the economies and the communities that depend on sustainable fisheries, but also for the environment as well. And I think, you've probably seen these factoids a dozen times, if not more. And, I put this in just mainly to remind myself and remind all of us, it's an incredibly complex and complicated basin and set of problems that we're trying to address. And it involves tribes, sovereign entities, it involves hydropower, recreation, parks, 7 states, 2 countries, and these are very complex problems. And, really we believe that through collaboration and cooperation, we're going to get to better solutions than if we litigate or if we take a heavy regulatory position. We think that rather if we can work together to recognize the problems facing this basin and have honest and difficult conversations about how we can address those together as a community in a way that works for all of the sectors, that works for all of the states, rather than trying to have the problems be solved with any one state or any one basin or any one country or any one sector. And we're importantly bringing some voice to the environment and recreational sector, but we don't intend to do that on the backs of farmers or ranchers. We want to work with communities, as do you, to try to solve these problems facing this basin. And then this slide and the next just sort of reiterate the problem that there is a supply-demand imbalance, and especially as demands increase. This is from the 2012 basin study that was conducted by the Bureau of Reclamation and with the 7 basin states, and I think the River District was a critical piece and part of the development of that basin study. And with climate change, just there's more uncertainty in terms of the amount of supplies that this basin will sustainably produce. So the last few slides, and then hopefully we can get into a little bit more of a conversation. I put up both sort of our priorities, and then I pulled some priorities from the River District that I was able to find from your mission statement and your objectives. And I think there's a lot of common goals, and definitely would love to continue to work with you, as we try to figure out solutions that work for the communities that we represent. So for us, we really divided into 3 different areas. The upper basin, we support flexible water management. We are not a fan of buy and dry. We have seen in Colorado what that can do to communities, and Crowley County is sort of the poster child of how not to do things. And we believe that that's a lesson that we need to continue to keep alive and learn from and promote alternate, more flexible solutions. And I think to the extent that we can allow farmers and ranchers to realize additional value from their water rights, but not buy and dry, and that can provide those communities with a future that we're going to be better off. We also support additional funding for Colorado's water plan, and I think we've been working somewhat with your director on some of these conversations around funding. And in the lower basin, we're trying to help eliminate the structural deficit, and I think that's a goal that I think we share with you all, which is, if nothing else, we can recognize that the lower basin does have more demands than we believe the river can sustainably provide, and to the extent we can keep that in check and we can reduce their uses and promote water conservation in the lower basin, I think that's something that we should all be pushing for. And I think the drought contingency plan was one way in which we were able to do that, but as we look to the next several decades of water management, it's going to be perhaps more challenging. And then basin-wide, we do on-the-ground work in a variety of different river basins. We've worked in the Gunnison and the Dolores River Basin. Here in Colorado, removing tamarisk and non-native plants and vegetation, replacing it with native vegetation, and trying to ensure flows for the river or those tributaries. We've also done that work in Utah in the Escalante River Basin, as well as down in Arizona in a variety of different basins, the Verde, the Gila, the San Pedro, and then in Mexico with the river delta. And then we also encourage funding to support water conservation and water efficiency. And then just pulling off of the River Districts Initiative, some areas where I thought we have some commonality, and I'd be interested to talk this through with you, is pursuit of techniques that reduce risk of Colorado River curtailment. And we support that goal. We are trying to figure that out as well, and I think we ought to be working together to see what works and what doesn't work. Protecting Western Slope rivers from trans-mountain diversions. I think we're interested in the Colorado River environment and recreational community, and to the extent that there are sort of two TMDs that are out there, and perhaps the last ones. I think the time of big trans-mountain diversions from the West Slope to the Front Range, I believe, is over, but it's not automatic. I think you need to have a strong river district, and I think we, along with the environmental and recreational community, need to make sure that those values are represented, and I think we have common goals around that. Studying voluntary compensated agricultural water use reductions as a way to preserve agricultural economies. We stand side by side with you to figure that out. There's a lot of talk about the demand management programs and all of that, and we absolutely cannot allow that to occur in a way that devastates agricultural economies, or we will have failed. And I think we want to stand with you to figure out how can we develop voluntary compensated arrangements that work for agricultural communities and keep them healthy and thriving and vibrant. And then finally, refining and developing and implementing the Colorado Water Plan and funding around that. I already talked a little bit about our interest there. Expanding public outreach and education to the general public is something that I think we also strive to support, and it was something listed in the mission. And then finally, maintaining healthy and safe water quality. And it's not an area that we work tremendously in, but I think it's integral to everything that we do. And I think watershed health in particular is one area in which we have worked. So maybe I'll stop there and just see if there's any specific questions or thoughts, and I would really welcome a conversation about sort of what it is that we do, and I would keep an open line of communication now and into the future, because I think there's lots of people that like to say, well, here's why they're doing what they're doing, and I'm here to tell you, like, I'm a resource to you. If you have any questions about what we're doing or why, I'm happy to talk to you about it. And hopefully this is helpful, and hopefully we can work together at solving some of the problems facing this basin, because these problems are bigger than any one entity or any one district. They're very large, complicated problems, and I think we need everybody pulling in the same direction. So thank you.
Okay, do we have questions? Yes, ma'am.
Ted, nice to see you today. Just a question for you. I recently had occasion to look at an agreement, a three-way agreement, not with your entity, let me be very, very clear, but with another conservation group that owned water rights from a ranch. Different entity was going to own the real estate. CRWCD was going to get an in-stream right. And there was a lot of language portraying it as being a great way to try and, avoid buy and dry, as you pointed out, that you don't support, and have water that would be available for in-stream flow, but also available for agricultural use. But as I got to the back of the agreement, there was a provision that basically said, but the water rights owner, conservation group, has the right to take the consumptive use and use it for other purposes. which to me sounded a lot like, and there was a dry-up covenant that went along with this property. That sounded a lot to me like buy and dry. And so I just, it was kind of disconcerting because it looked as though it was, going to be set up as being really a partnership kind of thing. And then at the end of the day, it looked like buy and dry. And I'm going to just assume that's not something you all are doing.
Yeah, so we, and some people have termed what we're doing is, in talking about leases or temporary transfers as buy and dry, just with a different name. It's maybe a smaller number of years or what have you. And I would say, and I do look at, throughout the basin, for example, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And in particular, there's a Metropolitan Water District agreement between them and Palo Verde that for many years was held up as sort of the model. I think it paid some of those farmers and ranchers a certain amount of money right off the bat just to be open to the idea, with the idea that I think at any one time a certain percent, I think it might have been a quarter or a third of the district, Palo Verde district, could be in a leasing or some kind of conservation agreement. They could do crop switching or things like that and reduce the consumptive use that would then, and they would be paid for that specifically. Importantly, another really key component of that agreement was they set up a fund that was available to that community, and it was overseen by community leaders to say, hey, as we do this, are there going to be impacts, social impacts, environmental impacts, or other impacts that this fund with the community leaders can oversee how to deploy those resources over time. And I think there's certain best management practices that I think could be developed or established. And I think, as you described, this shouldn't be a backdoor way to do buy and dry. It ought to, if it's a number of years or a percentage of the lands that a specific landowner or district could enroll in any one time. I think those are some types of rules or sideboards or, that I think, we don't know what they all are, and I don't think we are the right ones to decide that absolutely. It's really the communities that have to figure that out, probably with help from folks here at the River District and perhaps the state and perhaps groups that we work with as well. But, I definitely, I don't know about the terms of that particular agreement, but if it sounds like there's a backdoor way to do buy and dry, I don't think that that's something that we would support. I do remember one other thing, which is the in-stream flow statute that exists. I think it allows water users to be dedicated, conserved water can be dedicated to an in-stream flow. I think it's 3 out of 10 years. There's been talk about expanding that this year potentially to 5 out of 10. I don't know if that's the right number, but I definitely think, I've looked at, I think it's Yampa, the Yampa area, where they have already done it 3 out of 10, and they're saying, well, we would like to do this again. And I think they're almost the poster child of saying, well, if there's a willing landowner who wants to conserve the water and dedicate it to the stream, and there's money available, I think, who are we to say what an individual farmer or rancher should be able to do with their own private property right, except that some sideboards should protect the agricultural economy, right? And so it's a conversation or set of conversations that I think are happening right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, as I say, I just found it disconcerting I felt like it was kind of false advertising, to be setting it up as though it was some kind of benefit to agriculture and then basically still have the right to essentially buy and dry. And it just seemed to me that those kinds of agreements can cause all sorts of mischief and unintended consequences. And I assumed that wasn't what your foundation is doing. I just kind of wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I'd be interested to learn more about it too, especially if it's being used for in-stream flow purposes. It does have that added protection of only being able to do that for 3 out of 10 or maybe 5 out of 10.
Other questions?
We've had considerable discussion about upper basin, lower basin issues, and just looking at your very pretty map of the United States with all the rivers. I'm curious if you have discussed what kind of role you would play, and I'm thinking maybe it could be a public outreach kind of role at some point in time, rather than getting with Eric Kuhn and figuring out all the engineering. But have you discussed that?
Yeah, and I presume you're talking a little bit about as we start to renegotiate the guidelines. Yeah, I think absolutely there is a role that we can play with regard to public outreach. I think we did a lot of that already in the context of Arizona, where Arizona was the only state that had to have legislative approval to sign on to the drought contingency plan agreements. And so we provided sort of nonpartisan or bipartisan education of businesses and community leaders about what is this DCD and what is it not and what is it and why it could be helpful to Arizona's future depending on how it was crafted or what have you. So absolutely, I think we could be playing that role. I think it may be more important in Arizona and to some degree in Colorado. I think when I think about the basin, I think of those two states as critical states on sort of opposite ends of the basin, and in terms of just how important the Colorado River. I mean, that's not true at all. It's critically important to California and Nevada and all of the basin states, but I do think Arizona and Colorado have special roles going forward with the negotiations, and I think we could certainly help with that. Yeah.
The questions from board members? Mr. Gray and then Ms. Zucker-Pisco.
Hello, Ted. I'm Tom Gray, and I'm on the. I live on the Yampa, and as well as Doug's on the Upper Yampa in Wright County. I'm going to end here with a little bit of a question, but many times it feels like, because of your focus on environmental and recreation interests, that the money, the grants, and the support from the Walton Foundation tends to flow through the NGOs that are primarily concerned about those values, environmental and recreation. And I'm just going to be candid. A lot of times, us in the ag community, we get word of, oh yeah, you guess who just got a Walton Foundation grant. And while I heard you loud and clear that you're really striving to make sure all sectors are represented, I can tell you that at least perception in the ag community is that it's not quite balanced. So I was going to say, how do you ensure that all sectors are truly represented, or explain to me whether you believe they are?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate you raising it because it's something that I think we struggle with, right? It is, we have supported agricultural organizations, Colorado Ag Water Alliance, or CAWA, I think Colorado Cattlemen's. We've supported the Family Farm Alliance. We've supported a variety of different agricultural sort of groups, but agricultural groups don't necessarily cover everybody, right? Like farmers and ranchers are, there are thousands of them in Colorado and throughout the basin. And it's tough to say this one group can represent them. National Young Farmers Coalition is another one we represent. So we have tried to support capacity, staff capacity, to be able to enlist or sort of give voice to those disparate farmers and ranchers throughout the basin. And I don't know that we always do a great job. It's tough to capture, everybody, to be sure. I will say that to the extent that we are pursuing solutions that benefit the environment, but also take into account the communities in which we work, we've been a strong supporter of NGOs that live within the communities in which they work. And so I think Trout Unlimited and TNC have done that pretty effectively, and being able to say, and it's a lot harder to not be in tune with that community if you're living there and you see people at the grocery store and you can hear about what their concerns are and why they might be opposed to something or other. But we welcome other ideas you have about that, and And I look to, just this past couple of weeks up in your basin, the announcement of the closings of those plants. I mean, that transition through just, no specific person or entity's fault, but that transition is going to happen. And how do we as a community, and how do you as a community help figure out how to transition that community in a smart way?
That's on the top of our
We'll
mind.
spend some time later together.
Yeah, I mean,
Some money would help.
Well, we have resources and we are trying to figure that out, and I think we welcome your thinking about that, because, there's not a specific entity that we could say, oh, well, this would capture it, or this would, but maybe of specific interests that may be able to help us figure out how do we transition that community in a smart way that doesn't just eviscerate that community, because I don't think that's what we're interested in. And I don't think that's what you're interested in. So how do we work together to figure that out? We welcome it.
So let me just follow up right quick. So I appreciate that, because, we're looking for all answers we can come up with. And I want to be sure to say, because many of my friends on NGOs and stuff are here today, and you're right, we have good local relationships, and that's continuing to go. However, maybe a suggestion would be, and we do that pretty well, we have the basin roundtables and so on that are locally driven. However, those who bring the money to the table, and if it's funneled through an NGO, really do have a little upper hand on the direction. And so maybe a little bit more active on your part to say, let's make sure that we're hearing from all sectors here 100%, even though the money went here. Let's make sure that it's a program or it's funding things that are really, truly going to be vetted and not get kind of turned a little bit more strongly to one sector than the other.
Yeah, and I would say a few years ago, 10 years ago, I would say the environmental and recreational community was in the same boat as the agricultural or farmers and ranchers in which you're talking about, in terms of being under-resourced, not having the capacity. And so to the extent that we can expand that capacity, or have been able to, I think we take that as a victory. But what I would say is it's not a victory without cost. And so how do you, ensure all voices are heard, and there's equity and opportunity in decision making? Yeah. Tribes is another area in which we're trying to do that same type of figuring, because tribes have traditionally been underrepresented in the basin, and I think they're starting to actually be, considered as real players, and I think that's something that we're looking at too. So, thank you.
Mr. Acrofresca.
Ted, you shared with us that the foundation has been active in some river restoration work in the basin. Could you share with us a little more detail about that? I assume that the foundation contracts with local entities for that kind of work. And could you tell us what the goals of those partnerships are in river restoration? And are you getting the bang for your buck that you intended?
Yeah, so we have supported in the past the Tamara's Coalition, and I think they're now called River's Edge, right there in Grand Junction. And we also support a lot of community-based groups. So, for example, in the Escalante River Basin, I think it's called the Friends of the Escalante, or in the Gila River, it's the Gila River Partnership. And so we've supported those community-based groups to try to envision and demonstrate that a healthy river or a healthy watershed is not necessarily going to eviscerate that economy, but rather it can build on it. So I think really we have two specific goals. One is to demonstrate the actual on-the-ground success of when you use restored flows and restore riparian habitat and reconnect communities to the river. That can be good for the community and good for the environment. And then the idea is that we can populate that out, across the basin. If other communities can see, the Verde River in Arizona is a great example where they really turned their back to the river, and through working with community leaders and farmers and ranchers and water use districts like the Salt River Project, we were able to reconnect the Verde River community to that river. We've restored flows, we've restored habitat, and there is now a healthier watershed. There's, and there's a recreational community that's been built up around that. They have done some crop switching, so it hasn't just reduced, it hasn't reduced consumptive use completely, but it's retimed when that consumptive use occurs. So they've moved from alfalfa to barley, and then they've created industries, or they have a barley malting plant, and so they've developed jobs around the beer and the beer producing work. And then they also, because the barley uses water in sort of January through May as opposed to May through August, there's more water in the river at the time when it needs it, in sort of that really hot summer season. And we've been able to connect the community. So it's sort of demonstrating the value, and then hopefully having other communities pick up on that and be able to do that in their communities as well.
And how about your Dolores River project?
Yeah, so that project started before I came to the foundation, and actually ended before I came to the foundation, but I was aware of it from when I was at the Water Conservation Board, and they did do restoration. They did some tamarask removal, and they were trying to restore flows and restore the riparian habitat. And I think importantly, the foundation is very goal-oriented or target-oriented, so we set goals for ourselves, and in that instance, they had specific goals for reducing the amount of non-natives and trying to increase the flows, as well as increase the amount of native plants in that riparian area. And we had met those goals, and then we stepped back. We do provide some small funding, I think, for monitoring and research. And I think there's federal dollars that come in from BLM that I think continue to maintain the strides that we were able to achieve with that big influx of resources. But I don't know that has served as a demonstration to other communities just yet. But I don't know that it's failed either. I think it's still probably could use some additional attention to be sure.
But by and large, does the foundation believe it's getting the results that it intended for the investment that it's made?
It's mixed. We have had some river basins where I feel like I think we've been able to demonstrate clear improvements in the watershed health in terms of biodiversity, species increases, water flow increases, and which has served as a surrogate. And in other instances, I think we maybe haven't been able to achieve the results that we thought we might be able to achieve. And so in those instances, we have stepped back in some cases. In other cases, we said, well, let's give it a little longer. So it's an interesting situation, but we do try to base our decisions on actual data and information that we collect. And we set these targets, and we have the flexibility to, if we don't meet those targets, to continue going on, or we can also say, maybe this isn't the best use of our resources, maybe we should pull back. And it's really an iterative conversation with the family members and with the committee and with the staff and communities as well. And it depends, it really depends.
Thanks.
Hey, Ted, Representative Mark Catlin, who could not be here today, has often referred to the corollary of by and dry as lease and cease. We have seen over the years some very ambitious schemes that have come to Western Colorado that have been fought back to lease water. There was the Chevron proposal, there was the Galloway proposal, there was the Resource Conservation Group proposal that we're going to lease water, either just the water rights themselves or build reservoirs and lease that downstream, but only for a short period of time, only for 20 years, and we get it back with very strong promises of lots of things. How is this different? Colorado, Western Colorado, and the state of Colorado fought these very strongly to avoid making water a item of interstate commerce, and we were very concerned over that. And what are we? what is the difference in this latest scheme?
Yeah, well, I guess I would challenge that there's a scheme at all here. I think, you know, we believe that climate change is real and that the amount of water that the river sustainably produces is not what any of us, you know, or any of our forefathers thought back in 1922. It just isn't. And I think if we all collectively stick our head in the sand and don't acknowledge that reality, we're not going to be happy with the solutions. And so I think I would challenge, and I'm, you know, I would challenge that there's buy and dry, which is permanent, absolute. And then, you know, while leasing may not be ideal or preferred, and, you know, I think there are other ways as well. Deficit irrigation is something that we have to continue to explore and learn about the benefits and also drawbacks of. And I think also crop conversion, switching from one crop that uses more water to one that uses less water that may have a higher value is another thing that we've got to continue to figure out and think about. And there's been some interesting things being done in Arizona related to that just this past year. I think if we just ignore the problem facing us, the enormous problem facing this basin, I think we're, you know, shame on us. And I think there's also a complicated problem for anybody to say, here's what you should be able to do with your water right, and here's what you should not be able to do with your water right. I mean, it's a private property issue, and
There's the usufructuary right, as you know, too.
yeah, well, it is, but it is somebody's private property. It has real consequences if you say you're not allowed to lease your water right to whoever.
To San Diego?
Well, we
I mean,
haven't figured out any.
It's a matter of
We haven't
degree.
figured out any way to do interbasin marketing, and I'm not saying advocating for that today. I do think
Today.
No, I'm not. I mean, I don't know that it would even be possible in the situation. What I would say is, if we in the Upper Basin, and I'll look at Kansas v. Colorado, or the Rio Grande, or the Republican River, there are downstream states that depend on our living up to our compact obligations. And I don't think that Arizona or that Kansas v. Colorado, where it was 2 states in 30 years and millions and millions of dollars, is the best way for the state of Colorado to go. I think if we can craft solutions that work for us as a state and for us as a community, we're going to be better off than if we just say, well, throw up our hands, or let's take our chances in litigation. I just don't think that's, you know, we lose control when we hand it over to somebody in a black robe. And I think we're going to be better off if we can help craft solutions, ones that work for us. And maybe there are ways, and I'm sorry that Director Catlin's not here, I'd love to hear what ideas he might have to help face or solve some of these problems that I think we may be facing in the next 10 years. And, you know, it's an open invitation to continue that conversation for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Mueller.
Well, Ted, first of all, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to point out that Ted, who covers the entire basin for the Walton Family Foundation, specifically through conversations that he and I were having about these very same issues we're talking about today, he volunteered to come and spend some time with us, and I really appreciate your willingness to have this dialogue. I think this board understands, but one of the things that Ted mentioned that he's they're helping fund is the For the Love of Colorado effort. I know that, well, first let me say this board did endorse Proposition DD unanimously, despite some reservations held by directors about some of the wording in it. One of the things that I would point out is that through the group convened by Walton and the Gates Family Foundation, they came up with, studying the water plan and came up with a fairly good discussion and description of the different buckets of water or of areas that projects needed to be funded. And among those, that because of the diverse group that was brought together, and by the way, that includes myself on that committee, and Terry Fankhauser from Cattlemen's and other interested groups, one of those buckets is productive agriculture and also aging infrastructure improvements. Those two buckets are incredibly important to Western Colorado and to our district and the ability to sustain agriculture and our economic activity. I think the other thing I guess I just want to make sure we all focus on is that we need all the allies we can get when it comes to recognizing the harm that future major TMDs would cause. Walton has been very helpful in those discussions statewide, and I think it's important that we recognize that. I don't really have a question, Ted. I just want to speak that on my connections with those efforts, because I think oftentimes we see what Director Gray is talking about, which is just the funding of particular groups that are perhaps environmentally oriented. But in those other discussions that are going on, the Terry Fankhauser and others, and myself included, were able to without any resistance, push the importance of productive ag and making sure that agricultural communities stayed intact. And I think that we that doesn't get as much press and it's certainly not as interesting to talk about at the corner store, but it does happen, and I will tell you that I appreciate Ted's willingness to have us at that table and also to push those issues that are important to our district.
Well, thank you.
So Ted, thank you for coming. We've seen each other a long time ago, so dating ourselves. So I'll follow up with what Director Gray said and what Andy's just said too. We have an aging rancher. Basically it's 60 years old right now.
Doug and I are the youngest.
Yeah.
Boy,
and some of us have transition plans, but most of us, the affordability of getting into this thing. And we just follow up with what Andy just said is we have this aging infrastructure. We had almost a 35, 40-minute debate about our aging infrastructure in the 6th division, and the rest and are basically they're right at 100 years old. We're so far behind on the times that nothing can, and yet I will tell you that the ranchers are pretty proud people. They don't like asking for money. We don't need that, so we just can't figure out how to get one hand in front of the other and try to solve some of these problems because we're too proud to ask for money. And yet and so we have started in the Yampa Basin the IWMP process, and I think it's going to be moving forward really well. But again, we have this transition with the ag community that either we have especially in the mountain ag communities, we have new people coming in with outside money and really don't know the front end of the cow to the back end of the cow, and so which is all good, and they're keeping it in ag. So but anyhow, somehow I appreciate and I will follow up with. Rambling here, but I'll follow up with Director Gray's comment too. We've had a great relationship with the NGOs, DNC and Trout Unlimited, and helping us through that and creating projects that are multi-beneficial, and that maybe it makes me feel better to ask for money because it's not just helping me and my bottom line, it's actually helping the environment, clean water, and the rest. So I appreciate that, and we'll try to keep you up to, come visit us and see what you can help in the Yampa. That'd be great too. So
great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted, for coming out here and bearing the slings and arrows of some of our comments. But we appreciate what you're doing, but we are concerned when someone with big money starts coming in. And I think that's been kind of a history of a lot of things out here. So
I appreciate that, and just please know that my phone line is open at any time. If you have a specific concern, I'd welcome your call or email, or if you have ideas about, how we can provide capacity to groups that are underrepresented. I'm all ears. So.
And as we look to the future, as Doug mentioned, I've got aging infrastructure too with my hip. So,
there you go.
So that's a problem. So.
Thank you
very much.
I'll see you through the day. Thank you
so
much.
Hang around for everything else. Good. Before we move on to the next item, I want to recognize Jackie Brown, who managed to sneak in with the Upper Yampa and in a couple of capacities. Thanks for making your way over here. And Angie Fowler in the back also, who didn't have near as far to come as Jackie did. So thank you for coming. Okay, General Manager's report.
Well, thank you. We have a bit to talk about. I think the first item on the General Manager's report is kind of an update on our long-term fiscal condition, and there's a recommendation in there from me with a request that we have a good discussion and get a little direction. Just to be clear, certainly not asking for a motion or any kind of decision on putting a question on the ballot. That would be appropriate later in the year if you're inclined to do so. But I think it's important. I believe most of you have read my memo, if not all of you.
All of you have.
I know.
You expect all of us have. Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard. I want to stress that we have. There are a couple kind of key issues here. One that I think the prior general manager and the staff have done a tremendous job in maintaining the growth of our expenses at 3% or less on an average annual basis, given the large expenses that we see coming or increases in things like healthcare and wage pressure in Colorado in general, and certainly in our mountain communities, and just added to the base inflation. That 3% is an important number. I think a lot of organizations and governments don't manage to keep their expenses at that low rate of growth. And so we've done a good job on that, and we continue to do that. In fact, over this last year, we had a decrease in our expenses. Actually, if I could ask Ian, maybe if you don't mind, Ian, just joining us at the table here so that we can, Ian help me participate in this discussion. But so while we're doing our best to contain our costs, we are looking out at the long term, just as we look out at the long term of water supply and try to understand what's coming our way. And Ian and Audrey and Lucy have done a tremendous job in helping me try to frame that and understand where we're likely to head. That trifecta of forces that are hitting us are outlined in my memo, and certainly were more detailed in our February of 2019 board memo. We have oil, gas, and coal-related tax revenue declining. By the way, I want to point out I wrote this memo, I think like a day or two before Tri-State made their kind announcement about what's going on up in the Yampa. So I didn't include that particular urgent news there, but obviously we're all aware that there's an accelerated plan to close those plants and the associated mines up in the region and within our district. We can expect not only a hit to those regions of our economy, to those areas in particular, Moffett County and Route County, who will be impacted, Rio Blanco County, who will be impacted by that, but also our own tax revenue, while may seem less important to folks in Craig, it is supposed to be my job to watch out for that. So we do anticipate seeing an increased decrease in the amount of revenue we receive in that area. The Gallagher Amendment, as I mentioned, we escaped a significant decline in the residential assessment rate, which disproportionately hits our rural district this past adjustment period. We did that not because of anything within our control here in the district and not because of any economic activity within the district, but solely because of the oil production in one county in this state, and that was Weld County. So we actually have something to thank the beneficiaries of the CBT project for a rare moment. Their oil production kept that RAR up to a 7.15%. As I mentioned, I think that the oil fields in our state are under some significant both financial pressure given the leverage that a lot of the producers have encountered or have incurred up there. They're heavily in debt. The oil is still down around $60 a barrel, and at that price, Texas can outperform northeastern Colorado on a pretty regular basis. So the state is a little more optimistic, certainly, than I am in terms of where that production is headed in the state. As I mentioned, the state is predicting a relatively minor decrease in the RAR 2 years from now. The one thing I would point out is that the only thing the state is consistent in is completely missing the boat on what happens on the RAR. So they really have been off in their predictions in the past. I think we need to look at that and understand that it is likely coming our way that we'll have a reduction in that. If you remember the predicted reduction, just dropping it, what they predicted last year at this time, we would have had a $370,000 hit per year in our general fund. That's roughly a 15% of our general fund, and it would have been a really significant hit. So something to keep in mind, because I don't think we're out of the woods on that, and we won't be until and unless our state figures out how to deal with that amendment in the Constitution. The other, Tabor is the will of the people, passed in 1992. The part of Tabor, we get hit by both the tax cap, right? So our maximum mill levy under Tabor is 0.252, which is where our mill levy was a year ago. There's also a revenue cap under Tabor, and that revenue cap it forced us this year to actually reduce our mill levy so that we stayed within the Tabor limitations. And by doing so, had we actually gone previously to the voters in our district and asked to be debruced, in other words, to remove that revenue cap, we would have had an additional $140,000 in revenue. So there's that seesaw effect. Now Tabor also provides that appropriately, the only way we can raise our taxes and change that tax rate cap is to go to the voters and have a majority of the voters in our 15-county district approve it. And so Tabor has those controls. It also, I would, as pointed out in the memo, as part of the revenue cap, we have been unable to bring state grant funds in through our general fund. So we have been doing that very successfully in through our enterprise and helping our local partners with agricultural efficiency and improvement projects. We have been able to do that primarily because we've had $3 million a year in revenue in our enterprise fund, which is this year has been cut back to $1.5 million under the terms of our lease with Denver Water, and next year will go down to zero. It means that our Tabor capacity, grant capacity to receive state money and funnel it into things like the Lower Gunnison project will drop down close to $100,000 or $200,000 is what Ian's predicted at this point, starting next year. It's a significant hit to the creative ways we've been able to fund the activities of the district and really help protect, conserve, and develop West Slope water by leveraging outside funds and bringing them into the area. So we have concerns about that. I don't want to get too far into it, but as you know, our enterprise itself does have a healthy reserve today, but we are concerned about making sure we have the appropriate amount of capital available to conduct capital improvements and repairs on our own assets. And we believe that we have real potential significant expenses coming our way on some of those assets, and that healthy reserve that we have needs to stay healthy, needs to remain fiscally sound. Our predictions are that if we don't find a course correction very quickly, that enterprise reserve is predicted to go to zero by the year 2040 if we keep things the way they are. So something to
As long as Social Security goes to reserve.
right. Yeah, unfortunately, we can't just pass an act of Congress and have the enterprise fixed. All that being said, I think one of the things I look at in coming into the district and as the general manager is really spending a lot of time refamiliarizing myself with the history of our district and really why we were formed to begin with. We were formed to protect, conserve, and develop the water resources of the Western Slope. When we were formed, our predecessors went to the General Assembly and said, give the district tax authority at 2.5 mils, right? Today, our taxing authority sits below 1/10 of that original authorization. Even though it was less in total dollars back in 1937, it was the same.
$18, I think, back then.
Yeah, but it was the same percentage burden on our constituents. Our constituents, our founders, truly believe that an active river district with not just our legal and engineering skills, but also the ability to assist our partners in building their projects is absolutely critical to the health and economic welfare of the district. Over the years, we've, primarily due to the three items that I've touched on, we have less and less ability to actually help our partners in those projects. I will stress that when I talk about projects and our partners, I again go back in time to the history of the district. And yes, our district historically was interested in consumptive uses, so agriculture and industry and municipalities. It also, when you read our early history, was clearly interested in preserving recreational and fishing economies. Even far back before we were formed, the West Slope Protective Association, our predecessor, Grand County was a primary member of that, fighting for the preservation of stream flows for their recreational purposes. So today we have those same conversations. Back then we knew we were on the same page and we had one cause. We have one cause today. And so it's with all of that in mind, and frankly, also with 25 years of representing West Slope folks as an attorney and now on the River District, that I know our constituents do not appreciate tax increases, right? But I also know our constituents understand the value of water and they understand the need to protect water. And they understand that there are projects that are bigger than one ditch company or one farmer, rancher, or one municipality can actually afford, one county it would be. That we actually do have projects that are important enough for the entire West Slope to get behind. And whether that's the Windy Gap bypass channel or an augmentation program up in Uray County, whether it's the Lower Gunnison project in Delta and parts of Montrose County where we can improve efficiencies, whether it's up in the Yampa where we supply water out of Elkhead and or the main stem of the Colorado, our other projects. These things are really important to helping our entire economy and keeping our rivers healthy, keeping our economies going, keeping our agriculture and our cities viable. So I will tell you, it's not without lack of thought that I'm recommending that this board consider looking at asking the voters appropriately under Tabor a very straightforward question to support a tax increase, to give us $0.5 mil, which would bring in additional revenue. And as I lay out in the memo, we really want to see that money primarily going to leverage and partner with our partners on the West Slope on projects that span the scope of our water improvement needs. So everything I've mentioned to date, I mentioned some categories of water use, the productive agriculture, aging infrastructure, conservation and efficiency projects, watershed health and water quality projects, and healthy river projects. These are all, these categories should sound familiar to you, by the way. They're identified in the water plan. They were identified in Proposition DD, or the legislation authorizing it. A lot of our constituents in many of our populated counties did not support DD, and I'm aware of that. When I've been out talking to them as to why they didn't support DD, what I heard was, we don't want to send money to Denver. We don't believe it will come back over here to help our water users. We think it will fund a Trans Mountain diversion. We think that it will damage us on the West Slope. So the question is, how do we actually help our water users who recognize that there are needs, help our communities, but do it on a regional basis? And honestly, this is, I will tell you, it's a lot of money, although it is very little drop in the bucket when you're talking about building large buckets anywhere in even small buckets. But what it does is if we were able to have that money and fund these projects throughout the basin, it allows us an equal seat at the table, if not better. Today, we're there with some really great engineers, some really great legal counsel, some fantastic government affairs folks. We're helping with our accounting and admin staff, but we're there with our hand out and with nothing other than our expertise coming to the table. And it's really hard to get an equal foot and to push our priorities as a district without having that money behind us. And you know, as I mentioned, you know, I believe that's where our district was intended to be. Is to have that leverage, and it's where we should be. It's not where we are today. And so I have really thought about this. I think, as I mentioned, what we're talking about in terms of a tax hit to the average homeowner in our district is actually pretty. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's inconsequential, but the average impact is $8.63 to an average priced home in our district, right? Now that ranges from Moffat County, where it's, I think, about a $3.71 hit, to Pickens County, and seems Mr. Haley's gone, but that hit would be about $23 per home in Pickens County. Per year. And that's about, you know, on the average home, that's 72 cents a month. You know, I challenge anybody here to buy a cup of coffee for 72 cents. I know I can't buy
I
it.
usually get for 99 cents.
Yeah, all right.
I buy cheap coffee, though.
And so even with a half a mil, if you look at at the tax bills in the counties and in the different regions within those counties, our tax rate would still be the lowest or the second or third lowest of any taxing entity in the entire 15 county region. Many, you know, I don't want to pick on them, but the Colorado River Fire District just down the road from us is about to ask its voters for a 6.2 mil increase to fund its ability to protect themselves. The main reason they're doing that is because of wage pressure. They can't keep talented firefighters working in our region because of the same reasons that we're running into here at the River District. Why are we able to do it for less? Well, maybe because we don't have expensive fire trucks. But we can do it for less, I believe, because we actually, through this relatively small tax increase, leverage everyone on the West Slope. And it's something that we don't get to see these other districts doing, because we cover such a broad area in the district. I've talked long enough. What I really am looking for is an open and honest dialogue about what it is, where you think we should be headed. If you think I'm completely off my rocker for suggesting this, or if you think that you want additional information, such as some public opinion research, whether we should look at a sunset provision, whether you would like staff to identify projects that are of the type that we would fund in each one of those areas, so that we can't say that we will fund very specific projects, because without our boards looking at those projects and knowing they're viable and knowing they're really appropriate, it would be hard. But I think we can give a list of the types of projects and examples in every county, in every region. And why do I think that? Because we have these phenomenal BIPs, the Basin Implementation Plans, that have lists of projects that our local water users, through their roundtables, have put together. So I think we could come up with some lists that would work and help you understand and help the public understand what we're talking about. We need to do some work with legal counsel to find out if there's appropriate wording. Well, we know there is appropriate wording, but what is it for a ballot question, if you direct us to do this? And then we can continue to investigate other approaches if you have suggestions in terms of other ways to fix our long-term fiscal issues. But that's really where I'm looking for direction from all of you, and really appreciate your willingness to engage on this issue.
I'd like to open it up to the board for comments and discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it's obvious that this is a necessary step forward. I'm wondering, can we put the debrucing and additional mill levy on one question?
We can.
And then we talked a year ago or so about de-Gallagherizing, which was very popular with fire districts, but I don't know of anyone else who's done it.
You can do it in the same.
We could do all three?
Yeah, you can.
Same balance, same question?
You can, but the reason my recommendation doesn't do that is, honestly, CMC did their de-Gallagher recently. If you look at the language of that question, it sounds like they're playing games, and it's not a straightforward response to Tabor. It in fact looks and feels like it might be a workaround, and I don't know that I mean, if you tell me that's the way you want to go, I'm happy to go that way. But I didn't feel. I mean, the voters have said we want you to follow Tabor. I think we honor it. We have to make our case as to why we're good bang for the buck. But it and I would say in the long run, just A.D. Gallagher doesn't fix our problem.
No, it doesn't.
I just see more and more residential, quote unquote, that's really commercial, short-term rentals, which drives me crazy.
Well, that doesn't, Gallagher doesn't do that anyway.
Well, I know, unless we make them commercial.
Right.
And then it could, but I don't think that's happening.
That would be a great fix.
I do think we've done polling of our voters over and over on ballot questions, and one thing that's come out consistently is that the sunset changes their perspective a little bit, but not enough to make it worthwhile. That's just Summit County voters. I do think it would be really important to have all of our amazing media people working on steroids to make it happen.
Right. And just to be clear,
it's going to be up to us, the folks that are at the table, with the exception of Peter and Andy and Ian. It's really going to be up to us to make this thing happen.
Right, but they need to send out the messages of all the good things.
We can,
they can message.
We can and are engaging in a very robust education and outreach program, and I really do encourage all of the board members to stick around for that I&O committee meeting at 4:30 this afternoon. I know that we'll be holding you from cocktail hour, but it's really worth hearing what this team is doing. They're doing an amazing job, and they have a work plan that you're going to feel bad for them. They must have someone who's pushing them really hard. So.
And that's specific to the ballot issue.
No, it's specific to the river district's increased presence.
We are not campaigning on a ballot issue. No. We are engaging in education. One of the things
this has been a long time coming. Frankly.
One of the things our past public opinion research has shown is that while we think we do a great job, and so do people who know who we are, the only people who know who we are are about people sitting in this room. There are about 5% of the members, the
Right.
voting public in our district who actually know who the Colorado River District is. So we have an educational problem. So.
Yes, sir.
I guess one of the things that I'll be asked when I talk to the constituents that I serve is, what are some of the sideboards that you're looking at putting on to using for this funding? You know, I know it's a preliminary policy, but that's definitely something that they're going to be asking for. I know, Andy, you kind of expressed a few projects or BIP concepts. That's wonderful, but I think we need something a little bit more tangible to really share with them.
And I think we heard that loud and clear from the Grand Valley the last time around.
Mhm.
And we need to let folks know what we're going to do with that. If we're asking for more money.
Correct. And somehow, I don't know, I just got to, from keeping the system from getting perverted.
They all get perverted.
I know,
Whatever.
but keeping it for what its intended purpose was for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think the voters are going to. That's a great point. And if the direction from this board is to bring back additional information, we can. I'm happy to work on providing a structure or a kind of sideboards that would create what we think would be appropriate, and then get their input on how to properly structure it.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'd like to see us keep Gallagher on the table, at least as we go through discussions the first few months, because even if we debruce, without another source of revenue other than property tax, our revenues will continue to go down every year just because of Gallagher. It's been successful with library districts, school districts, Colorado Mountain College, fire, ambulance. That's not to say it's the right move for us, but I would hate to take it off the table this early.
Okay, I hear you.
Yep. Other Mr. Munger.
Not questions, so are we ready for comments? So good.
Yeah, comments, yeah.
Broad-based comments, you know, so, we talked about this heavily at the last February again, last year. And I'm kind of one of those, we either do it or not do it. And I think we need to do it. I think it's time to do it. We already know where the future lies with us, especially with the reports that we already know are happening with, Senate Bill 181, the oil and gas business, and then the coal situation in our past reliance. And again, I don't know how much more we can rely on Eagle County and Summit County and their residential growth and the rest. So
Keep sucking up from there.
I'm all fine, you guys think, but you're running out of land too. I mean, a huge public participation there. So I think that we need to make a concerted effort to move forward on this. And again, I don't think it's going to be easy. It's not going to be anywhere near a slam dunk. I understand. I mean, I've been very adverse in my county business at doing just live within our means and live within our means. But if we can't get through 2000, the drought, 2002 and 2000, and the latest drought, and the 19 years worth of drought, and if we can't come up with concepts of projects that we can actually be an advocate for the population of Colorado, or at least of the Colorado River Basin, I mean, we better start thinking about Plan B, and Plan B is on resuscitator. And so, that means cutting a whole bunch more than what we've already cut. And so I think we need to, I'm one of those guys, let's make the decision and get over it and move on. So, I think we beat this around again last year at this point in time. I am a little concerned about the two questions, whether, and if, again, I'll take it at face value that you think we can still get this done on one question. I would suggest that we not be too specific on list of projects, because I think those can be just as much detriment as they can be good. I think we need to make sure that we're going to be advocating for all of the Colorado River Basin and we all know that the Colorado River Basin when I was a kid is a lot different than it is today. I mean, especially with recreation and environment. So, we're going to be, we talked about that during DD. I think the big winners out of DD is going to be the recreation and environment. So, I mean, that just made sense. So I guess the other question is that I think we have a very limited time schedule here. If we want to get moving on this, we probably need to backtrack out from November of this year, and and we need to have a concerted plan. I don't disagree; it needs to be board action. We need to move forward as a board, and we solicit some help. But if we can't get help now through the last 19, 20 years of a drought, we're not going to get any help. So, thank you.
Thoughts, other thoughts? Mr. Gray?
So I had a chance to visit with my commissioners briefly, and we're not going to be asked to take official stance here. And I just want to kind of, along with what Alden said, their specific questions were, first of all, what projects? Because what are you going to use the money for? I said some projects. What projects? So and I know we're a very diverse district, and some people are full of optimism and they're growing, and it's easy for when you're optimistic to vote for stuff. Rio Blanco and Moffat County are very pessimistic right now, and the other question I got was, well, is the revenue limitation hurting you, or have you been under that cap? I said, well, not really, because the other counties are running, keeping us up. So we've been able to grow by 3%. And they said, well, we'd be loved to be able to continue to grow by 3%. So that's just two things that they're going to want a little bit more specifics, I'm sorry, about the type of projects. They're going to be asking, what can we tell our voters that's going to be good for us? We could sure use a little good news. So that's just the two things I heard so far.
I appreciate that.
I guess I'll chime in here at the current time then, because when I joined the district, I joined Eric 35 years ago, and I think I met John about a month after that. The River District we occupied about 25% of the second floor of this building. We had no assets at all. We had some used desks, and we had some selector typewriters, and that was it. We were, in terms of being a force in water issues in Colorado, we could scream a lot on the table, but that was about it. We didn't have any resources we could bring to the table. As Steve knows, I met you in the legislature when I was working on that. We were able to, we tried to articulate issues, but we didn't have the ability to bring resources, be it money or water, to the table.
No, but the River District always had a good, credible voice.
We had a good, credible voice, but what has happened in the last 35 years is we've been able to, we've seen the change in the issue that if you want to get something done, you have to get it done locally. We recognized in the late 70s, early 80s, the Bureau wasn't going to be building projects anymore. If we needed anything, it had to come from us. And we also had, at that time, we had a $500,000 levy up until 92 when it started to degrade under Tabor. We had $500,000, and it's gone down ever since that point. We have, in that time frame, done an enormous amount with the resources that we've been given and that we have developed. And we have been, Andy and Eric before him have tried to say, well, we're not really hurt by it, but, there have been constraints they've been operating under. The USGS Cooperative Stream Gauging Program. We've been dialing for dollars quite a bit on that and having to triage stations each year to say, well, where can we cut back because, their costs are going up and we need to keep this down. And each of the things that we are doing, we have had to keep doing our core missions, cut back a bit. Just as, if you get really cold, the blood doesn't flow to your toes and your fingers anymore. It cuts back to the core of your body. We haven't had to cut anything off yet, but we've tried to try and warm those extremities up a bit. So I encourage folks over the next few months as we think about this to let your constituents know. I was at the Garfield County Commissioners yesterday, and the applications to drill are way off. That means we're going to be seeing lower revenues within Garfield County from oil and gas, which is going to hurt them and it's going to hurt us. We're going to see that decaying over those years. Garfield County, which has been a significant contributor to the River District, about 60% of the tax base was from oil and gas development. That's going to decline. And one of the reasons, frankly, that the Colorado River Fire and Rescue is going to that mill because they're seeing that wall come. I I am concerned about putting a time frame on it, because what you're doing is you're giving our successors essentially a wall to run into in 10, 15, 20 years. And we need to make sure that we are able to pass on to our successors what we have been given and enhance it. So that's my soapbox. Yes, sir.
I agree with that, Director Merritt, but I also think that we need to stress that we have to be proactive going forward. It's not just that we are facing constraints on what we can do now. We have to have the ability to react in an increasingly difficult environment for Western agricultural water use.
Yeah.
We have to protect that, and the way to do that is to have ammunition available, and we're running out. So I think it's important that we try to do something to increase our revenue. The question I have, and I have to ask the others on this board who are more politically astute than me, is what are our chances? I think we really face a difficult battle. There are a number of tax-averse areas on the western slope. And so we're really going to have a struggle to make the case of what it is we need to be doing, and that protecting our resource is, I think, in some ways even more important than a particular grab bag of projects. So those who are commissioners or who know the politics of the area can probably speak more clearly than I as to how reasonable the prospects are of getting something like this approved. But I think the need is clear. We need to try to do something. We need more information, though, and that's
what we'll work on the next 5 to 6 months. Mr. Gray.
I just follow up on Director Halby's comments. I think you're right, Tom, regardless of what I just said my commissioners had asked. I think it's imperative to very accurately articulate the bigger picture in order to get voters in my county to understand, because we might not be able to describe specific projects that they can say, oh yeah, they're going to come and do this. So yeah, that's my feeling, is it's going to come down to how do you articulate it very well.
Any other comments on this item? Yes, sir, Mr. Kafeska.
I was thinking back to the workshop we had last February, and our general manager pointed out back then that no ballot initiative has passed within our 15-county district without success in Montrose and Mesa counties.
Yep.
And I assume that's not changed. Tom, those are a couple of the most tax-averse counties within our 15-county district. So that needs some careful consideration. I believe we would all benefit by having some good current polling data, perhaps both district-wide and county-specific in the case of certain counties, with a variety of questions, a variety of question combinations to lend us a little bit of direction here. But I believe, Andy, you and I are going to visit with the Mesa County Commissioners in the very near future. And in the name of fairness, we would want to share with them what we're considering here. And I think they would have some valuable feedback for us. But I believe that a little investment into some current polling data would really be helpful in making these kinds of decisions.
And I appreciate that, Director Prescott. I will tell you that I agree, and will have been kind of wanting to listen to everything you all had to say. If you remember, last year you actually authorized specifically a contract with the public opinion research firm, and we did not do additional research last year, held off with the intent to have data this year, and our plan is to have that research available and presented to you in your April board meeting. And so your input there about a variety of circumstances and also particular counties' opinions about those particular possibilities is exactly what we'll look at, and I appreciate your input on that. I think it's imperative that we understand what the voting public thinks. I will tell you there was some interesting water research done recently by a different group that shared it with us, and just talking. They were studying public opinion on water, and they actually used our district as an example in some focus groups. And they some of those focus groups were based in Mesa County and down in southern end of our county, Montrose or district, Montrose Uray area. And those groups came back and said, once they actually learned who we are and what we did, they were very interested in supporting it. They found the mission of the district compelling. Their willingness to support a tax increase was really significant. Now, those are small focus groups; those aren't large polling, but they looked at those issues really, just to understand if a regional approach like ours would work better than a statewide taxing question. And so they what I was heartened by is that if we're actually successful with our education campaign and perhaps and I say education and outreach effort, which I do want to point out. I mean, this board has prioritized education and outreach for the last 10 years probably, and we have been getting better, but we need to get way better. And it's not just about this ballot question that we need to get better about. Getting people aware of the risks that we're facing on the river and the pressures that our district is good for our constituents. It's why we exist, helping them understand, especially as new people move into the area and don't have that same historic understanding. So we've been doing that. We just are finding new ways to do that and stepping it up. But the encouraging thing that I saw in that focus group work that we talked about with this other group was really that once they understood what we were doing, it was a real positive, overwhelmingly positive across age groups, across political affiliation, across counties. The willingness to support our work and our mission is key. But the question is, how do we get them to understand it? So,
yeah, and it's going to be not real easy in a presidential election year.
Yeah.
When the messaging is going to be competing with the presidential election, a U.S. Senate election, and some other big items that are going to be on the ballot.
Correct.
We're going to have to work hard to find our own niche in a way to get that out. And I think we're developing that as we develop our information outreach.
If we decide to go that direction.
Yeah. But I think in terms of getting our information out, I'm really impressed with what the staff has done last year, changing things around. So, yes, Bert.
Just one last comment.
Okay,
I don't want to argue with Director Gray at all, but
go ahead.
I think there might be a little clarification on my side, maybe, that I don't think we ought to be identifying projects as much as we ought to be identifying programs. And if we can identify programs that we're going to be an advocate for John Q. Public down on Main Street in whatever town, or we're going to be an advocate for John Q. Public sitting in his residential development, that we're going to protect their water, and we're going to be their advocates. So I think it's more into programs but if we go after project specific, my feeling would be that, well, everybody can be find one little line thing that you don't like about a project, and you'll be against the whole thing. So I just would clarify my point.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would support that line of thinking as well. Once you start identifying projects and you have people in Eagle and Summit County saying, hey, we put in 40% and we don't have any projects, how does that work?
The
But
types
we're-
of projects that we
I presume polling would test and see what messages work and what don't. I think the timing is really good with all the big river issues and drought contingency, and people generally have this idea, even if it's vague, that the Colorado River is in trouble and that we're at the headwaters and that we need to do something about that. And it seems like there's a message there that is programmatic related, that could lead to projects for sure.
So, and I'm hoping if we do make this decision, that I can get everyone's support as we move forward. This is going to be critical. And I feel like kind of the head of the church building fund, but it's going to require money, people. But we're going to have to be able to fund that and not lean on the staff for this. It's going to have to come from the leadership from this board. So,
Well, I would require some time before saying yea or nay.
oh yeah,
Well, we're not asking anybody to
I'm not
say-
asking for it now. We're looking at.
I understand that, but a considerable amount of time to talk to a lot of people to frame the topic, to frame the issue.
We're looking at this
That's why I'm
summer.
bringing it up now.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Move on to the next.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, Peter, yeah.
Just some nitty clarification points, but since I'm the lawyer at the table. The River District's mill has been set since about 2004. We provide a temporary reduction when there are periods of growth in order to comply with Tabor, but we don't have a continually ratcheting down mill since about 2006, that time frame. And the other thing that, just as a point of clarification, the current staff concept, and it's premature to call it a recommendation formal for action, obviously, but is for to increase the mill to 0.5 mils, not an increase of 0.5 mils. Just for the record.
Thank you. We'll try to get through some of the other items reasonably quickly. The drought contingency planning and demand management update. Lay that out in the memo. I do want to just ask if we have several staff members who are on some of the CRWCD work groups, and then we also have a few directors who I think serve on them. I was hoping we could get just a real quick status update, maybe starting with Dave Kanzer. Dave, if that would work with you. Dave's on the agricultural work group, and if you want to just provide a little update as to where we are on that, or where you are on that as a group.
Sure, love to, thank you. And Director Gray is also on that committee, so please jump in here. I think you may have missed, did you go to both?
No, I don't.
Okay, so we've had two meetings, August 8th and November 26th, most recently here in Glenwood Springs. I can't say that we've made a whole lot of progress. We've got to know each other. The group is made up of probably, looks like about 12 to 14 folks. I would say a reasonable proportion are producers and water users. TNC is also represented, Department of Ag, John Stolp, or some of the names you'll be familiar with, in addition to the CRWCD staffers. Really the effort's been to try to, again, get to know each other, get to know the issue, and that means trying to put together what work has been done on demand management or related ag, we'll say conservation efforts, putting that together on a Google Drive, so a lot of presentations and discussions. Some of that include system conservation efforts that have gone on Grand Valley as an example. Some things on the East Slope. There are East Slope participants. I should mention Eric Wilkinson, another name you'll be familiar with, Travis Smith from the Rio Grande. And so the next steps really, to cut it to the chase, are to hire a contractor, potential project manager, and/or specific subject matter experts for ag, and to try to come up with some, I guess, action plan on how to investigate the feasibility of a demand management program and to bring in ag users that's consistent with the other groups. There's a lot of discussion about, well, how does this fit in? We can't operate in a vacuum. You know, we're only talking about one piece of the puzzle. What about all the other impacts? And the other groups are probably having that same question and discussion. We're programmed to meet again right around the IBCC meeting in March. And next week there is what they're calling a regional workshop in association with the Colorado Water Congress. I'm going to participate in that and sort of lead the ag demand management, or report out for the ag group. So it'd be great to get some input here. And you know, obviously the temporary, voluntary, compensated sort of party line is one that we talk about quite a bit. Everybody at the table seems to agree upon that. And the equity issue is front and center. That one's a little harder to get across with some of the Eastern Slope participants, I would say. But we haven't had any substantive issue discussions about what it would look like. We're just really trying to lay the foundation for that. And by July, we are tasked with a formal report, or staff, CWCB to the CWCB board itself at their July meeting. So that's kind of our next target / deliverable. And in between there, we should have this project manager or vendor chosen, and that's happening right now, according to Alex Fong. We don't know who those folks are. There's a sort of that standard cone of silence when they're trying to procure those services. We haven't been asked for a lot of input. We gave some names, and we're not sure exactly what's going to happen next, but we'll be presented with that information, I suspect, in the next month or so. Did you have anything, Dr. Gray?
You've done a good job.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask DK, what will be the role of the consultant? What will they do?
Well, you know, that's a great question, and I'm not sure how I'm going to have a real satisfying answer, except that to put together, you know, some potential actions to really address, you know, what are the impacts. I think we, in the room here, can suspect what those are going to be. I would guess that consultant would reach out to a broader constituency to make sure that what the report out covers is consistent. But I'm not exactly sure. There'll be a report. Hopefully it's not going to just sit on the shelf. It's hopefully come up with some guidelines or some guidance to take the next steps for a potential demand management program in the ag sector.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
But again, if there's
John,
any
maybe
input,
if you
please.
can give us some insight in terms of your committee.
I don't know if I'll give you any insight. I sit on the quantification and verification group, and then I sort of semi-sit on the administration group. Quantification and verification groups met twice. It's supposedly supposed to meet again in February, maybe if they get around to getting it scheduled. And, you know, I think the first meeting was certainly all over the map, you know, kind of a nothing meeting. It's kind of like, what are we doing? And, you know, everybody wants to know what's going on in everybody else's meeting, just like DK alluded to. So the crossover piece is there. I think quantification and verification group is probably ready at their third meeting to actually maybe do what they thought they were supposed, or what people thought they were supposed to do, and work on questions about how do you really quantify consumptive use savings, and how do you know, what are you going to do to really verify it? So maybe it'll get going. The administration group, if you want to go hang out with a bunch of former state engineers, that's probably the place to go.
Sounds fun.
It's met once, and I think a meeting's set up again for mid-February or something. I don't know if I'll be able to attend it or not, but I think, honestly, it was probably a good start, but kind of a nothing start, honestly. It was really kind of a background primer on how the Rio Grande Compact, it works and is administered. Quite frankly, there are probably very few lessons, a lot of lessons to be learned, but very few things you can apply from Rio Grande Compact administration to administration of the demand management program, just as a practical matter. Work in progress. I was at Southwest Basin Roundtable last week, and there was a lot of discussion about demand management groups, and most of it was stated looking at Russ George as he was there, and this issue, there was a common theme that, okay, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of angst to get these things going, and now it seems like they're probably moving really slow. And then there was this discussion about all this cross-pollination. So I think Russ is taking that message back to this March 3rd or 4th meeting, and probably that how to make these groups work together is going to be a topic of discussion.
Well, in fact, as John mentions, the March 3rd and 4th meeting, there's an IVCC meeting the 3rd, and the 4th is a joint meeting of all of the work groups and the IVCC. So it is that cross-pollination that they're trying to achieve is the goal. But it is moving slowly on all fronts, right? I mean, I would say. Hey, Jim, you have an update on your education information outreach work group?
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
We met on August 15 and not since. And part of the problem is CWCD staff transitions. Anyway, there's a meeting that was put out as possibly February 10th, 14th, and 21st, and no word yet on what any of those dates would be. But nevertheless, from the first meeting, there was a lot of discussion about what are the key questions about demand management, like what is it? Maybe demand management, there's two words, we know what they mean, but what it means for the public is demand management of water, but what's the context? So we got wrapped all around the axle on that kind of material. But even though we're the most important group, we haven't met for a while.
Okay.
Well, thank you, sir.
And then economic and local government. I just want to say that initially Chris Treese served on that, or was going to serve on that. He retired, then Sonia was going to serve on that. She left. For some reason, I can't find anybody else to serve on it from who was an employee, because they're all worried it's the end of their career. So, just kidding. But if Kathy and Karin could give us a little update, if you don't mind.
I just wanted to say to Jim, well, we're the most
Oh.
important.
Okay.
But actually, we haven't seen ourselves as that. We've really been looking toward mostly ag and money, and why don't you tell us what's going on there, because obviously that's where the water is. And so we've looked at some presentations about the economy of Colorado, where the jobs really are. We've mostly talked about how, well, we need to see where ag and the money funding efforts go, and then we can respond.
We're meeting again next week after the meeting at Water Congress. And I would just note that there are a whole lot of Front Range water providers on that local government and economic development work group.
Wonder why.
There's Karin and I, a woman from Steamboat, and a guy from Durango. Everyone else is a Front Range diverter. And there was a pretty bold statement, I thought, from Aurora at our first meeting, who said that ag is where the water is. Ag is not important. Population growth in the metro area is important, and that's where the water should go.
You've not heard that before?
Well, not out loud,
Not in a public meeting.
I mean, that's a pretty. I thought that was a pretty.
Sometimes people let their guard down, actually, say what they mean.
Speak honestly by accident.
Yeah. Well, thank you, heavy and Hartford.
So it's the end of our career, is that what you're telling me?
What are you gonna be doing next week?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the, Peter and I sit on the Law and Policy Committee. We sat in one meeting. It was held in mid-December. It was a good meeting in terms of issue identification, but even at the Law and Policy Committee, the state staff was steering the direction towards hiring a consultant. You've got a room filled with
Consultants.
experts in the law and policy field, and the idea of hiring an expert to then do their work is really an interesting one to me, and I haven't quite got my head around why one needs to hire a consultant to do the work of the people who volunteer to be on the work group, because I thought they were supposed to work. But and I think that's true on the Ag Committee. I think that's true on many of our committees. So it's an interesting methodology, I think, that I haven't quite figured out. I suspect that will be among the discussions at the IBCC and the work group meeting, because I'm going to bring it up and ask about it, because I just don't quite get it, honestly. The process I think is moving slowly. I don't think that's harmful. I think it's important to study it, and it's okay if it takes a while. If I can just, trying in the interest of time, ask, were there any questions about my UCRC and CRWA update? I wasn't going to cover it at the meeting. I just want to make sure you saw it in my memo, and if you have questions, I'm open to answering. If we can turn to Colorado River Basin hydrology, Dave put together a memo with Don, and they're both here. And if you guys want to do a quick presentation, that'd be great.
Happy to do so and try to update you. The memo we wrote was, could be a little out of date. Things haven't changed dramatically. I guess that's good news, bad news. We're kind of right in the middle. Get this thing going here. But Don did update the slides, and we'll kind of go through those quickly for you. Everything works. Starting with the snowpack, and kind of self-explanatory. Here's the good news, right? Where the snow, pretty much basin-wide, is above average. And so we're expecting another little shot here, but we're kind of looking at a drying pattern moving forward, at least the outlook, not so rosy. But this is why the forecast, the middle picture there, is the soil moisture deficit. So from left to right, we kind of see the snow conditions, which are good, soil moisture, which is bad, and in the forecast, which are in the middle or below average. And really that middle panel tells the tale. We had a really dry late season last year. Last summer started out really, the spring was cool, wet, as you know. It transitions rapidly to warm, hot, dry, develop this deficit, as they talk about, and we're just trying to fill the soil moisture, so to speak, before we can really anticipate healthy runoff. So right now, runoffs are in the 80% range. Powell, as an integrator of the basin, 82% of the last forecast that I saw, which means we're kind of right in the middle. This plot, which is a little bit busy, but just you can see the historical trace of the elevations, where we've been. We're kind of in that what we call upper elevation balancing tier, above 3575. That's the good news. We've only dipped below it twice in the recent history, but the outlook, the 2-year outlook from reclamation is kind of staying right where we are in a sense. There's a lot of uncertainty, of course, being in January. A lot of our significant snowpack accumulation is yet to come. And so when we look forward, before we look forward, just look at Lake Mead. Again, that same picture shows that we're really just kind of holding our own, which in this day and age is actually a good thing, I guess. The interesting thing here for Lake Mead is that they stayed out of shortage, but they are still in the DCP tier 0, which means that you heard earlier, about 200,000 acre feet will be retained, mandatory retained between Arizona and Nevada in Lake Mead. So that's a good thing, and why that has stabilized somewhat.
What I found interesting, one of the articles that was forwarded just this last week said it was going to cost the operators of the recreation areas a lot of money to raise the docks because the water was raising. I thought, that's a problem?
I was just going to say this is the first month that actually shows a better situation for both Powell and Meade from the previous month. The projections have been going down for both Powell and Meade from 1 month, 24-month study to the next. And this is the first one where we see a slight increase in the projected conditions.
So that's kind of the good news. Here's the bad news. We're not out of the woods yet. And this is very cyclical, as you can guess. This is from the Drought Monitor, the Drought Mitigation Center out of Nebraska. They published this monthly. And so a lot of Colorado, western Colorado and southwestern Colorado are still considered to be in severe drought. Again, that's really that soil moisture deficit that is impacting us. And again, looking forward, not the best news, drying and warming in the southern part of the basin. The left is temperature, the right is precipitation. So
February, March, April outlook.
February, March, outlook, thank you. And so, again, can't really hang our hat on that. And then as you look even further out, so to speak, the outlook for drought, a little different than the picture we showed in the memo. Some propensity for drought development in Northern California, which is always troubling. The Sierra, we are actually more linked to the Sierra than you might think in terms of California's ability to conserve, and they're obviously the biggest draw on the Colorado River. They are not required to conserve this year, but they have been very successful, and you may have seen some news articles. John Fleck publicized this, that last year was the lowest take on the Colorado River since 1950. And so that was a combination of good supplies in the north and good hydrology, well, good weather, really, for California. So you can see drought persisting in terms of the outlook out through the spring in some of the heart of snowpack country. So not the most optimistic look ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Don to talk about some more basin-specific or sub-basin-specific stuff for our operations.
Sure, yeah, I'm just going to talk about Wolford and Elkhead, our enterprise facilities. Above Wolford, Muddy Creek, Snowtell, suite of sites there, just slightly above average, actually 170% above median, but bottom line is the water supply outlook is about 100% of average inflow, okay? And that's true of Elkhead as well. Next slide. So this is just Wolford operations in the last year or so, actually 2 years. The storage, the heavy brown storage, elevation, which represents really storage for this last year, was quite high compared to 2018, as you would expect. So, those two storage levels really point to the interannual variability that we see, interseasonal variability in the hydrology and the climatology. Next slide. Above Elkhead, again, slightly above average, 121% median for snowpack, but that translates, because of the soil moisture apparently, to about 100% of average inflow to the reservoir. Next slide. And again, this is operations there at Elkhead. You can see, again, the disparity in storage levels between 2018, 2019, and 2018. The Recover program released an extra 2,000 acre feet, so they released a full 7,000 acre feet, all that they could. And then this last year, just the 5,000 that's available to them was released. And obviously, the storage is quite a bit healthier than coming out of 2018. Next slide. And then the Gunnison River Basin, so my last slide. Showing a little less than average snowpack, and the actual runoff forecast for is right around 80 or I think 78% of average on the Gunnison. So again, from north to south, you're going from near average water supply predictions to below average in the south. Questions?
Any questions, anybody? Can you make it better?
Cloud seeding. We are cloud seeding today.
Thank you. That was my question.
Yeah, so it's really very storm specific, as I've mentioned in the past. This one is coming in from the north, so it's favoring, well, as it comes around, it's going to favor Winter Park cedars. Not so much in the southern part of the basin, but we've got those generators in standby or operational mode right now. Probably going to be turned on tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay, let's take a quick break. I think we'll be back here about 5 or 6 minutes just to stretch your legs and whatever else, and then we'll keep moving on. We're behind schedule, but doing a lot of good discussion, so.
Keep your hip moving.
Yep.
not a hard.
Notice which directors are well behaved.
Yeah.
That's right. We get an extra now.
Well, to continue on with the general manager's report, Mike Itell is here. As often has come up over the years, the question of phreatophyte removal as an augmentation source. That question continues to arise. And I asked Mike, who by the way has stepped up in a number of fronts recently, and really appreciate that. I asked him to provide us with a little update on the state of the science in terms of phreatophyte removal. And Mike, if you want to just maybe summarize your work and a brief summary of what you found, it would be helpful.
Thank you. Great. Good afternoon, directors. Again, I'm here to talk to you about phreatophyte control in the Colorado River Basin. And I'll first preface as I open up my memo on page 152. Somehow my spell check, I retitled my boss, John Courier. He's now the chief engineer. So I take a little slash for that right off the bat. But anyways, here to talk about phreatophyte control. Primarily, I'm going to talk about the paradox plan as I've come to learn about it, or tamarisk ISK, as many of you may know it. The genus of the tamarisk is actually spelled RIX. So when they rebranded tamarisk as a risk, that is the gist of the point there. But by doing so, you're labeling something that's perilous, hazardous. You're giving it a name, and you're kind of hyping it up. So in the early days, for phreatophyte control in the Colorado River Basin, they kind of villainized the tamarisk overall. And I'm not here to talk about river restoration or any of that. I'm here to talk about water supply, strictly from a water supply perspective, and we can talk about river restoration and what that really means. But in the end, back in the 50s, they really, different articles you read, they talked about how thirsty this plant was, how much it used, overused from the basin, 4 times the LA's consumptive use and all that. Currently, there's about 250,000 acres or more in the Colorado River Basin. I think it's probably a good bit higher than that overall. Number of phreatophytes that fall into that. With that, willows, cottonwoods are the normal ones you see on the river. Alfalfa is considered a phreatophyte for folks that are looking into this demand management. And so some of the early studies really just talked about how thirsty the plant was. They often ignored lower evapotranspiration rates, which were studied. They never compared them to the actual native fauna of what they were using. So as the science has evolved over the last 50 years, we've kind of taken a more basin-wide approach, holistic approach, and talking about what they're replacing when they're out competing the native fauna. And really what happens with the tamarisk, it was brought in the turn of the century for erosion control, windbreaks, a lot like kudzu in the south. I'm from the south, and kudzu's just everywhere, rampant, and it chokes everything out. But really, the tamarisk species is really good at monopolizing or colonizing marginal land, saline soils, uplands that are dry, things like that. Under normal hydrology, cottonwood and willow will effectively compete. But the tamarisk itself, and the reason they call it the paradox plant, is it has 2 types of longevity, that it disperses lots of seeds and also has a long lifespan. So that coupled together will outcompete native vegetation, and they can colonize very effectively. So with that being said, what does it use? And when they start looking at it, it really healthy riparian corridor with tamarisk, or if you can call it healthy, I guess, cottonwood or willows really use about the same amount of water consumptively. They transpire almost exactly the same. Where you find the big differences in the upland areas where tamarisk takes over out of the riparian zone. So once you've removed all those and you put in the tamarisk, or you put back the native fauna, the tamarisk actually probably uses slightly less water on an upland area, to the tune of about a half an acre for acre foot per acre with that number. And I think if you read in there a little bit more, the Colorado River Basin study in 2012 cited you'd have to remove about 60,000 acres at a cost of $400 per acre to yield 30 30,000 acre feet annually within the Colorado River Basin. That right there is a good number, and if you carry that math out, that's 24 million a year for augmenting the 30,000 acre feet annually, and that's basin-wide. That's not just Colorado. So for us in Colorado, I think you might find that as you drive down the Dolores of the Colorado, there's certainly tamarisk infestation or colonization, and are we here to change that and put it back to normal? I think it's taking control. It's probably that fire's just you can't put it out. As much as you do restoration-wise, it's going to come back and it's going to stay there. So the question is the ecosystem functioning properly in a riparian area with tamarisk? And I think you'll find that in the lower basin, certain areas, willow flycatcher prefers that habitat, things like that. Myself, when I floated the Colorado River, there's certain areas where it provides ecosystem services that other plants don't. So with that being said, what's the real skinny here? The bottom line is once you remove the tamarisk and let the natural vegetation go, it's almost a one-to-one. It comes back almost similarly. So I'm not sure what to say. I think in the Grand Canyon, tamarisk might need to be eradicated and removed. But up in the upper Colorado, it's something that River District wants to promote solely as a means of augmentation. I think it's a tool in the toolbox, but I don't think it's something that we probably should be leading the charge in necessarily. I don't think it's a end all. You're not going to solve our water supply problems with it. Bang for the buck. I think as you've seen in our grant applications, you get a lot of grant applications for it, and they have a very low cost effectiveness as far as cost per acre, and you get a lot of gains because you have a lot of community in there. As Ted talked about, you can reconnect communities through river restoration, but is that something we want to do for augmentation? And I personally, it's probably not there myself.
Agent Orange.
Hey, great.
Yeah, Marty.
I know this was about tamarisk, but is there any information about, comparatively speaking, the consumptive use of cottonwoods versus tamarisk?
Yeah, so that's as the studies. So in the field, these are very complicated. There's a lot of different factors that play into that. Climate, ecosystems, your soils, water supply being one of them. So in a healthy riparian environment, from the studies that I've shown, I think it's shown that the cottonwood versus tamarisk, it's almost a one-to-one. They seem to use in a what do you want to call it? Drawing a blank on how you refer to stands, but in a riparian trees, I'm really drawing a blank on gallery. No. Yeah, cottonwood gallery uses almost the same as a tamarisk would, one-to-one. They anywhere from 4 to 7 acre feet per acre of transpired water, but on an upland area, it's also dependent on groundwater, the depth to the root zone for the groundwater, for capillary action to take place. You have a limit to how far that can go, and that's somewhere about 30 feet that a plant can effectively take up in the taproot. But when you have rainfall and soil moisture and groundwater is equal, I don't think you're going to see much difference between what a tamarisk uses in the riparian zone versus a willow. And bringing in weighing lysimeters into a riparian area is really difficult. We can study alfalfa on a field with Colorado State University much easier in a field that's has roads to it versus going into some riparian corridor that's deep, channelized, incised. So it's very difficult to measure. But as the science has developed on consumptive use, I think you'll see that the plants, one plant versus another, they seem to be about the same.
Yes, sir.
I think we should be using a more accurate term other than phreatophyte control. We're concerned with invasives, not all phreatophytes. We're concerned with invasives, and we're not going to control them, but we can manage them. We should probably be saying invasive plant management.
I think that's more the question.
Yeah, that would be much more realistic. I believe that comparison that evapotranspiration is a one-to-one comparison, comparing a mature cottonwood tree with a big old gnarly tamarisk tree. However, I can show you places between the main canal in the Grand Valley and the river, which is many miles, where there's enormous tamarisk colonies that are picking up that water that's traveling underground from the canals and the fields back to the river. And these tamarisk colonies are intercepting it. You don't see cottonwood colonies establishing in this area between where water is put on the ground and the river. But tamarisk, you do. And that's what's new in the last 100 years since the tamarisk has been here. In fact, it's been around for so long, a lot of people take it for granted and have kind of written it off. You know, I sure hope we don't do that with these invasive mussel species, because if we do, we're sunk. We need to put everything we've got into preventing these invasive mussels from getting established. And I wish that we could have had people pushing for that 100 years ago when there was first evidence that this, what was originally a cultivated plant, was going to take off and become very, very invasive. Today we heard Ted Kowalski talk about restorative flows. They've had some success in measuring flow increases where they've improved riparian habitat and begun to manage these invasives. And it's not just tamarisk as a invasive plant species. In many parts of the river corridor, as well as the tributaries, Russian olive is worse, much worse. But usually the two of them are working together to occupy and take over what was in the past high quality riparian habitat. And you know, personally, I believe that the mission of the River District to protect and develop the waters of the Colorado River includes the quality of the riparian corridor. It's all related. It's all tied in together. But let me turn to the numbers. I really appreciate you doing this work, Mike, and I think it's good quality information. And I want to turn specifically to the numbers because I just did a back of the envelope calculation with a pencil, and it appears to me that, you know, you pointed out for the amount of infested area that's been calculated, it would take $24 million to get a handle on that. Well, if we look at the 30,000 acre feet recovered, it would appear that that's about an $800 per acre foot cost. And if we prorate that out over, say we get the benefit of tamarisk management or invasive management for 10 years for that investment, that comes out to about $80 per acre foot per year, because that recovery is an annual figure. That's realized on an annual basis.
That is, but it's also it's a reduced after establishment. So after 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a reduced.
Even if we
you'll have to mitigate that.
Get more conservative and say we get the benefit of the tamarisk or the invasive management for just 5 years, well, that's still $160 per acre foot realized. In the Grand Valley's demand management pilot program, that conserved consumptive use water that was put back in the river ran over $300 an acre foot
per year
to get that, to get that yield. And here there may be an opportunity to recover a certain amount of water for a fraction of that. So to me, This is a really good report, but I disagree with the conclusions that have been drawn here. And I think the numbers speak to that.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah. Director Aquafresca, if I can, I mean, what Mike has done at my request is really look at all of the science on this, and including the economics of removal, and I think really, as he stressed, and I think the background information plays this out, that you're not going to napalm these areas and not have anything grow back. You're either going to have tamarisk grow back, or you're going to have native vegetation at a high cost of getting those communities to grow. But once, as Mike points out, once those native communities mature, the water savings is negligible on that. And while I agree with you that riparian corridors are an important part of the river, and frankly are important to all of our wildlife habitat and others, I just can't agree with you on the idea that our district and others should be contributing significant money towards the removal of pteridophytes when
Well, I never said that, Andy.
Okay. I may have misunderstood where you were headed with that, though.
No, I don't think the River District's in a position to invest big, significant amounts of dollars into this. But what the River District is in a position to do is work with all 7 basin states to come up with an overall basin strategy for beginning to manage these invasive plants. And it's not like there will be a start and a finish. Once this process has begun, it will become ongoing. And I've talked to some of the professionals from the other states at CRWA and elsewhere, and there seems to be support for this. There seems to be some enthusiasm for all 7 states to get organized and start talking about a long-term strategy to help ourselves out. Kind of like, you know, what we strategized with these invasive mussel species, a big cooperative effort on all users, on the part of all the users in the basin. And the River District could be a terrific cheerleader in that process once we've identified the other parties in the basin that are open to this conversation.
I think, you know, we do have staff resource constraints.
We do.
I'm concerned about that. You know, I think that we just need to be careful, because this has been an effort, you know, that's been going on for over 50 years. Remember, Bureau of Reclamation had a very aggressive program in the 70s, and it failed. So, Mr. Gray, yes.
Well, I guess I just kind of want to say that anecdotally, what you see on the ground, yeah, the consumptive use of a willow may be the same as a tamarisk or Russian olive, but what you see in the lower stretches of our basin is that Russian olives and tamarisk grow where willows and cottonwoods never were. And so the plant for plant may be the same, but we have a lot more plants of this invasive species because they're ravenous to grow, and they take over. And so
Tom, are you talking more in the upland areas, similar to what Director Aquafresca was talking about?
Upland areas and high salt areas. You know, if you go from Maybell on down through the monument, there never were. You see old photographs taken by Powell. There was nothing growing there, sagebrush. Now there's tamarisk and Russian olives.
And when we look at some of the warmer climate basin states, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, you see some infestations in those places that far exceed what we've seen in this state.
And that's what I was going to agree with you. I think it's more of an issue for, like, say, southern Nevada's folks on the Verde and the Gila and these drier lower basin states. They seem to have a bigger problem, and they're focused on it much more.
But I'm pretty convinced that when the DCP was crafted and agreed upon by all the basin states, they would not have put phreatophyte control or invasive management and cloud seeding in there if they did not have some certain potential, some sure potential to helping out. So, you know, in restoring the flows of the Colorado River, you have to do all of the above.
Yep.
And we're doing really good on many of these things, but I think like all the basin states, we've just not put enough consideration into invasive management.
Okay. Yes, quick question. Let's go. Need to move on then.
You just hit me in the heart with this. You know,
Sorry.
2 plus 2 equals, yeah, I've hated this plant so much because it's really hard to take.
You followed on from Mr. Long, one of your predecessors. Yes.
Did you say she had commonality with Tom Long?
Yes, she does. She's got to kill herself now.
I agree with a lot of what's been said. I don't like the term that other populations should be supported. I just don't think we should be supporting non-native species like this. And again, the riparian zone shouldn't be just a monoculture. We should support, and I'm not saying we need to put a lot of money into it, but we shouldn't be supporting this non-native species in general and the monoculture that it creates. And I think the beetles have been doing a good job in some places.
So that. I focused on water supply. I didn't focus on, there's so much more going on tamarask eradication. You can talk about the beetle and all those things, and they're in place and they're actively spreading. So there's something that's going to be a change going on down there. But also, like, you know, the willow flycatcher is another one that kind of flips the thing, where that's a habitat for that bird that it's developed, and they're protecting that bird down there now in certain areas. Yeah. So I get it, and I think if you just read my conclusions, I think it's really more on what Director Aquafres is saying about invasives more than water supply, I think.
Well, but nevertheless, I'd stand firm that the numbers that you have assembled here for us really speak to an economic return when compared to some of the other things we're proposing.
There's an ROI on this for sure.
But I really appreciate this work, Mike.
Most of it, just for folks, it's all River's Edge. They've got a compilation of 23 different reports, and then there's a number of reports that went on before River's Edge work. The River's Edge compilations, it's quite comprehensive if people are interested in looking at that. It's very good.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike. I think on phase 3 of the risk study, John, unless you have anything to add to your memo, or if people have questions.
I have nothing to add to the in the memo. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to field them. Otherwise, read it and we can carry on.
Okay. I want to thank John for being the lead on that phase 3 and what we're kind of affectionately calling phase 3B, the more localized version of that. I think is great to see that moving forward and providing some useful information to our sub-basins on that, and it's helpful. The Water Bank Work Group update, I just mentioned earlier that Mike has stepped up in a lot of areas recently. Mike you don't need to step up to the table right now, but I just want to thank him and tell the board that Mike has stepped into where Sonia was our primary leader on the Water Bank Work Group. He has taken that over at a time where we're dealing with some complex, the secondary economic impact study, and Mike, along with myself and John Courier, have been pushing for some pretty arduous and detailed revisions and additional work on the secondary economic impact study, hoping to really turn it into a very useful tool for all of our residents as we're studying this demand management program that may come about. That touches on a little bit. I just want to mention that as you saw in a memo from me earlier, I guess in December or November, and certainly in press releases in a recent op-ed piece, we did receive a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation to help us with our phase 3 risk study, our water bank work group efforts in the secondary economic study, and a River District centric task force or stakeholder group. I want to stress that this is all looking at demand management, but it is looking at it through the lens of protecting West Slope water users and developing our own independent information and analysis so that we can not only help inform this board's perspective on whether demand management is a good idea, but also to funnel that information into the state process to provide additional resources for the state to consider. And in the aspect of the stakeholder group, the goal really is to say, look, if this is going to happen, these are the types of structures and sideboards we'd like to see from a West Slope water provider or water user perspective. It is not to, frankly, lead the charge or be even cheerleaders for a demand management program. That's not what we're doing. We're really want to look at it under the microscope and make sure that we do our job as a river district, protecting the West Slope and our ability to consume and use water.
That's really important.
Yeah.
I agree. You know, the board has authorized staff to work on exploring, investigating.
Yes. Yep.
You know, trying to identify what are the right questions to ask and where do we get those answers. However, we've had feedback in my county that there can be a perception on the part of some folks that the River District is advocating for demand management.
It's an interesting perception, and we'll certainly work with them because it's certainly not the perception or the position of our staff or certainly this board.
And I understand that, and I try to correct them on that. But you understand when an organization or its representatives are out there talking the subject in public again and again and again, perhaps folks that have already made up their mind on this begin to view it as advocacy. You can see how that would happen.
I can, but I do wish they'd listen to our words and understand what we're saying when we talk about it. So.
Okay, Andy.
Okay. Next is a joint funding agreement with the USGS Gauging. We're looking for a motion, which is contained in the beginning of my general manager's memo, and if you
DK memo too.
Yeah, and in the DK memo as well. The DK memo, Dave's memo on the subject. We are looking, as I said, for yes. And maybe Dave, do you have this, or do you want me to run with it?
You want to run with it, the DFA?
Yeah, I mean, all we need is a summary of the motion or the request that you're asking.
You've got it there? You want me to?
I've got it here, unless you want to.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions,
Right.
provide background. It's all in the memo and pretty straightforward. We do it every year.
The point is that basically we're asking for a authority to enter into a joint funding agreement that would commit the River District to the amount of $555,597, consistent with the adopted 2020 budget, and that we also enter into a request for me to enter into agreements subject to review and approval by legal counsel for reimbursement of some of that money from some of our local partners in the amount of $105,000.
I actually have a question before.
Yes, sir.
How many gauges is that?
Dave can answer.
How many gauges?
Yeah.
That's an easy question, hard to answer. I mean, we have both flow gauges and discrete locations where we do water quality. And so, are you asking about both? I mean, so some.
Well, I
some
mean,
of the areas
some
that
of them are what do they average, 16 to 20-some thousand a year?
How much they cost each? Okay, so customer cost. So again, surface water flow measurements in real time are about 18,000 per year. The water quality can be anywhere from 20,000 down to 2,000 because it depends on the frequency, parameters. So, you know, the 555,000 covers the whole myriad of flow monitoring and water quality stuff, as well as some really cool instrumentation up at the Free Lake system. That's where we have.
So it's roughly 25 to 30 gauges, somewhere.
Yeah, a little less. Yeah. Yep. And I'll call more about locations. Yeah.
I'd like to emphasize too that this covers essentially the long-term availability, public availability of all this data.
Well, I think they're very, very, very important, and I think the historical data that's gathered from these is I mean,
I second that motion.
So there's your motion and your
motion. A motion by Winery, a second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, sir.
Next item is request the board authorize the general manager to review with review and approval by general counsel to amend contract with Orlean Underbring Current.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Martha, second by Reby. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Audrey.
Okay. Discussion of health insurance policy. Audrey Turner has a memo in the board. If you recall, back in October at the budget meeting, we talked about some really significant increases the district is being hit with this year. I will say, in summary, this year through some magic, we were able to stay within the 5%, but had a few staff members step up and volunteer to take their spouses off of coverage in order to help the rest of the staff stay within the 5% growth rate.
So those spouses are running bare now?
No.
No, those spouses had opportunity for coverage through their employers. And so I think what we were doing with this update was just at the request of the board after our October meeting was to come back and say what those impacts were to staff. So what we did is we looked at a progressive formula, looking at the total cost of dependents, with the salary to come up with the cost share percentage of the premium dollars that staff needed to cover, essentially. The other thing that we did was we eliminated the HSA, or the health savings account contribution. And that's something that the River District has been contributing to employees' HSAs over the since about 2011. And that's been one of the methods that we've used to get that below the 5%. We've been ratcheting down that HSA contribution with the total elimination of that in 2020. And as Andy said, we had a few employees voluntarily remove their spouses who had other coverage. And so we're able to get under the 5% increase that we budgeted. So roughly that's about $500,000 in health insurance premiums that the River District is covering. The other thing that I just wanted to talk about a little bit, so the policy was adopted in 2011, and there was a lot of discussion about what the best way was to kind of control as much as possible health insurance increases. It's not a problem unique to the River District. You know, everybody's been experiencing these high increases. Garfield County in particular is one of the most expensive areas in the nation as far as health insurance goes. Yep. And so we set this 5% policy, and over the last 10 years, we've maintained that 5% increase. Sometimes it's been less on an annual basis and sometimes more, but overall 5%. For staff, though, one of the things we wanted to look at was what has the cost been over that same period of time in their out-of-pocket, whether it's through increased deductibles, the decrease in the HSA, and that's been about a 14% average increase for employees in out-of-pocket costs.
14% per year, or 14%?
14%, yeah.
Per year. Per year.
Yes, increase. Yeah. And so we've got a $5,000 deductible on that high deductible plan. And if you're not familiar, you have to pay 100% of costs up until that $5,000 deductible before insurance kicks in. We do have the more expensive PPO plan with co-pays and things like that. And employees who have opted for that have just had to pay that premium difference. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And then also the Western Slope Healthcare Group, which is what we have been a part of since 2000, has had an average percentage increase annually of 7.5%. So it's hard to look at nationwide, and there's different plans and different coverages, and so it's a really difficult thing to look at average. I think that I don't have that number in here. We can look, but I did go to just something that was not in my memo that I went to last week was in Summit County. They have the Peak Health Alliance. I'm sure you're familiar with that. They're moving into Grand County and they're looking at Garfield County and some other counties in southern Colorado. I think maybe Delta County is a county they're looking at. And it's kind of a similar concept to the Western Slope Healthcare Group. It's really where they go out and it's sort of a, gain more purchasing and bargaining power with more lives in these groups, where they go and negotiate with providers. I have a lot of questions still that I need to reach out to that group and find out if that's maybe an option for the River District should the healthcare group dissolve. We've been talking about the uncertainty of that group over the last couple of years. The executive committee of that group will be meeting really regularly in the first part of 2020 to kind of allow those districts plenty of time to figure out options for 2021. So at this point, we're not asking for any action. This is just an update. I think that the board has considered health insurance to be very important to the total compensation package for employees. So I think it's something that we will continue to work on and make sure that that's an option for our employees. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I was just going to say, you and I could talk offline a little bit.
Okay, about your experience with Peak. Okay.
I would say, we've managed it for this year, but looking at those numbers and understanding that, the 14% hit average per year that the employees have hit, that adds up. And I know the board has been committed to providing competitive pay and compensation, but that is, in the overall compensation package, losing 14% per year, by no means is anybody getting a raise at 14% per year to cover that. So in essence, our staff is covering that difference, and we're doing fine for now, but I think depending upon what happens with our current plan going into next year, we may be back here to talk about not just the policy on 5%, but some pretty major structural issues with our health insurance.
Whatever happened to the 250, 500 deductibles?
250
per person, 500 per family?
Oh, yeah.
That hasn't been around since I've been here.
Back in 1973, Dave.
Yeah.
So we had those,
Yes, sir.
So when we discussed that the last time, you said that they wanted your prime employers out of your group was going to leave. Did they leave then?
They did not. And one of the things...
So they're kind of continue to hold it up then.
Yes, well, and the reason why they did not leave is because so out of the 10 districts that are part of that healthcare group, 8 of those districts who have been what I'll say the higher utilizers of the plan in recent years took a higher percentage increase than 2 other districts. So we sort of negotiated and gave them a lower percentage increase to stay, and so that at least bought us 1 more year.
So just another question then for Annie and you both. So, appreciate the update. We remember it last time quite well. We had the conversation. So are you guys going to be researching alternatives then as we move into the 2021 budget then?
Yeah, so there's going to, one of the options maybe continue with the healthcare group. If the healthcare group dissolves, which is a possibility, and we should know that in the first half of the year, then we'll be looking at other options such as the Peak Health Alliance, which is more of a local option for us, or the small group market. Some of it depends a little bit on our health and how we're doing from a claims perspective as to what is going to be our best alternative.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I know it's a lot of pressure, a lot of work on you, and I appreciate what you're doing in this.
I never knew I was going to be a health insurance expert.
No.
Not necessarily the fun thing.
Yes.
Does anybody ever get to be a health insurance specialist?
Changes every year.
Right.
Thank you, Audrey. Turning to the general manager's 2020 goals and objectives. They're there. I'm interested in feedback either here as a group, or if you want to give me individual feedback, I'd welcome that as well. But if you take those goals and objectives seriously, as I discussed with staff on their goals and objectives, that by no means covers everything that I will touch this year in 2020. It's just the primary goals and objectives. It's not a comprehensive to-do list or a checklist. It's it's a list of priorities in a general sense.
I do want to mention that at the Garfield County Commissioners yesterday, the Garfield County Commission Chair, Mr. Martin, expressed concern over the fact that Mr. Mueller was not around much to shovel his sidewalks. So John had to.
John Martin lives next door to me, and he does shovel my walk when I'm up in your county and it snows here. You can thank Commissioner Martin. So I'll pass that along.
That's the me speaking.
I do want you to know as well that I have been seen waking up at 5 in the morning to get out and shovel his walk before he gets there. So,
you have to get up early.
It's not it's not one way.
Yes, competition.
Yeah. So that's okay. It's good to have a neighbor who's paying attention to when I'm out of town. So next item was the item we added. Jim Pokrant has for a long time served on the Colorado Basin Roundtable for our district as our district's representative. He has more recently served as chair of that organization, and he voluntarily. Well, it was kind of, let me just say that the Basin Roundtable there in the main stem created a Pokrant exception when he chose to move out of the basin and frankly out of the district. They kept him as chair of the Basin Roundtable, which I think is the only such predicament or situation in the entire state. He is, all good things come to an end, and has decided to step off the roundtable after this years of great service and really wonderful job, not only on that roundtable, but herding the cats on all 4 roundtables. In his place as Colorado River District representative, I would like to appoint Jason Turner as our representative, and I would like you to confirm my appointment so that he's fully vested with authority from the district.
Is there a motion?
He did volunteer for this, I just want to say.
There's a motion by a motion by Albee. Second. Second by Winery. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
All right.
I hear the train coming.
He didn't vote. He doesn't get to vote, does he? Yeah.
That's voluntold then.
Yep, exactly. Last item, service anniversary recognition. We have a couple really amazing ones here. John, if you want to take the lead on this, I think this is a testament to the district and to these employees.
I would invite both DK and Ray to come up here together. Yeah. Come on up, guys. DK says he should have worn his suit. I mean, okay, Ray Tenney is celebrating, we are also in 30 years of Ray being here.
Smile, Ray.
And I gotta say, there are things about Ray that I appreciate more and more every day. And part of it is his really good institutional memory of everything that's happened in the last 30 years. I tend to forget things almost uniformly after 5 years, but I can ask Ray and he knows the answer. And trust me, I respect that and rely on that more and more every day. The other thing is I really appreciate about Ray is his attention to detail. Okay, now sometimes I'm more of a big picture guy, so I get, let's go, Ray. But then 15 minutes later, I'm back in his office going, okay, what about those details? So, the detailed aspects of our project operation and whatnot is really important. And keeping track of those details and making sure things are taken care of is important. And you can rely on Ray to take care of those things. And the other thing I appreciate is, Ray's not one-sided, okay? He's as good at fixing something as Wolford as he is at working on recovery program issues. So, honestly, I respect and admire Ray, and we'll take
Well, I came here in 1990, and I figured if I stayed more than 5 years, I'd be running for any other job. And sure enough. But I will say that, I've done a lot of work on the district's assets, and the board has never told me no when I've asked for money. So you couldn't ask for more support than that, really. And that's been a great pleasure to serve you guys and the constituency. People ask what I do. Somebody asked today, and I said I fix broken stuff. We don't have very many things, but they seem to have more than their share of broken stuff. So it's kept me busy. So thank you very much, and keep doing this as long as you let me.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ray. And DK, okay, 25 years. Already? Almost a career, man. And again, DK is another guy that I appreciate more and more every day. And part of it is, a lot of the real on-the-ground benefits that the River District has achieved for our constituents in the last 20 years can be directly attributed to DK. I mean, we look at selenium in the Gunnison Basin and Uncompahgre Valley, and compliance with selenium. It wouldn't have happened without DK. I'm pretty convinced that it wouldn't have happened without DK. It's not the kind of thing that I'm good at, but he's really good at. The cloud seeding program, it wouldn't be where it's at without DK. I mean, that's his baby. The USGS program that we just talked about, DK manages that. He's our presence interstate on the salinity control forum. With those relationships with, all these people in the lower basin and the upper basin, and always pulling for the benefit of Colorado, and particularly Western Colorado and the River District. And as a result, he's brought a lot of salinity control dollars to the River District, and he's certainly, I think, been beneficial basin-wide there, and he's really now one of the leaders on the salinity control forum. So, important asset to the River District, and certainly done some good stuff for us, and I appreciate that. So, 25 years, wow.
So DK, how do you get fixed paradox?
Yeah, that's what I've spent most of the morning on, talking about paradox injection well, which, well, outside of our basin, is a pretty important salinity control project. One I'm happy to talk about, but probably not now. I don't really know what to say. I did reflect a little bit coming in today about my first day, thinking about the excitement coming in, thinking of how lucky I was to have the job, and I still feel that way today. So that's a good thing, and I really appreciate everybody here and the recognition.
I'll make one last comment on DK and then Ray and DK together. I mean, DK is also an extremely creative thinker. And, I think he can think outside the box and put things together, very complex things together and then work hard to pursue. The other thing I would say about both these guys is they are extremely dedicated to the mission of the River District.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're going to roll, let's see, we're going to have Directors Basin update concerns, and then we will roll the annual policy discussions into tomorrow morning so that we can move on into the information outreach program. But first, let's go around the table with the Director's concerns, starting with Mr. Winery.
Well, I wanted to thank DK. I mean, from Hinsdale County last year. One of the things that I've learned, and Andy, this goes a long way with your whole staff here, is they're extremely respected. If they say it, they mean it. And when it came to our avalanche issues and our dam water thing, I reached out to you all and DK. So when they started providing information, and we got an EWP project done in 30 hours. Right. I mean, but it came, I needed the information, and you guys were on the phone call, and that would have never happened without help from very qualified individuals who, when state representative and federal guys, and you say their name, it's kind of like EFHUD. When they're talking, they're listening. They're not telling you a story. It's a factual piece, and so I want to thank you. And well, thank your whole crew. Did a good job. So,
okay.
And it needs to keep snowing.
Okay, now.
No avalanches, but it needs to keep
snowing. Okay, thank you. Chairman Henry.
We're keeping a close eye on the Denver Water and Gross Reservoir 1041 discussions, court rulings. There's a lot of talk from Aurora Water about developing Home State 2 or Whitney Reservoir or something. They're doing some drilling up there, doing a lot of planning up there. So we are keeping an eye on that. We've had some preliminary conversations with the Front Range group who's looking at that to see if we can't take a more congenial approach by using the community water plan, our integrated water management plan that's going to outline what water is available in the Eagle River. Eagle River Water and Sand is sharing their data modeling, showing how much water is there, where the problems in the river are, and what the likely effect of any new storage project would be on the Eagle River. So we're going to try and be really data-based and see if we can make progress that way. But that's a big thing on our radar.
Thank you. Mr. Vanderbrink.
Algae. I want to take a moment to talk about algae, but also the program that DK does. We data mined over 40 years worth of data, and many decades worth of that is under that program that you just voted in here today or just passed. So we find it extremely valuable. And there's more that we're using on the sedimentation in Kenny Reservoir, and even with the sizing of doing reservoirs within our district or water management as a whole. But anyway, we got year 2 wrapped up, and unfortunately, no smoking gun yet. But I know they are looking at doing some best management practices, they've identified a few areas of phosphorus and nitrogen in our basin that could be causing that, and they'll be looking more into that next year. Temperature is another issue that they've identified because we're getting some return flows from some ponds that have been developed as well, and those are things that we're looking at monitoring. There's additional monitoring going on, some 24/7 sondes that monitor pH, DO, and temperature as well. But I know there's a conversation that you guys have heard me talk about before in the past, and that's the fish feeding that goes on in the White River. I know last year they did, it seemed like they cut back a little bit, and I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I know the algae effects that we had on the White River were less than what were experienced the year before, just I think mostly due to the hydrology. But nonetheless, that fish feeding continues to happen. There's several, and I'm really reaching out to, I'm going to keep spewing it until I get a response that's acceptable to me, but I really think it would be good I would like to ask the River District for some assistance, whether it's a letter of concern or something like that towards the fish feeding, because it is a direct injection into the water supply of something that contains about 50% total Cajarl nitrogen. And we're not talking just a few pounds, folks. Here we're talking tons. That's really a problem. And I know it's not just the White River. There's also some going on in other rivers in the state. But even CPW, they've raised some concerns because they see the impacts it could potentially have. So I know we're still reviewing the cause of this algae. And I'm not saying the algae is the problem or the fish food is the problem, but it definitely ain't helping it. And I have some real concerns that this is allowed to happen in an area of the world that has water of high value, as we see in Colorado. So, and until you really experience what happens with the full algae bloom, my goodness, you're going to wish you would have done something the day it happens to you. So anyway, I'll step down from my soapbox. Thank you all. And if there is something you can do, we would sure appreciate that.
Can I just ask a clarification? Are you looking for a letter from management to the landowners who are engaged in feeding of fish, or a letter to the Parks and Wildlife?
I think a letter to the Parks and Wildlife or the Colorado Wildlife Commission, whoever sets the rules up, would be appropriate.
And I certainly could take some direction generally from the board, or we could put this on the agenda for a formal discussion.
That's fine.
In April, if that's appropriate.
I think we ought to see what our options are. I don't know what regulatory anybody has on that, so I don't disagree with his thought, but I think we need to find out who.
Probably come back with
who's got the badge.
Yeah, take a look at it, see.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I think everybody recognizes the algae is a problem.
So, yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any assistance and, reviewing the alternatives, as Doug suggests, would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hazard.
I brought this up with Andy today. Well, I didn't bring it up. I really appreciate your foresight, and I was really impressed with the financial documents in the packet. So, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay, go down to Mr. Gray.
Oh, so do I need to go over there with that?
Oh, I'll come sit with you.
Okay. So I have a little bit different kind of a director's update here, but Andy and I have been talking, and Ray, and decided this was probably the best way to do this. So what you see on the wall is a picture of Elkhead Reservoir. That before the enlargement, that was a state land, Section 16 state land, and the River District acquired ownership of that state land back during the enlargement. And since then, there's been a few loose ends on some property boundaries and easement type things that I think Ray's been working on and just need to be solved. So it came to my attention earlier in the year, last fall actually, that we needed to kind of take a look at that. So Ray and I met up there on site, and if you see the little, about in the middle of the slide, the little dark green mark, and then Audrey, if you'll go to the next, yeah, that green line, and then we have a close-up of that. There should be a better.
Is that the one? Nope. This is the one?
There we go. So, by and large, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I think it'd be easier, since what I'm not asking decision, I'm asking for a head nod is from you in concept that, yeah, we're okay with what you might be proposing. That lighter shaded area is in relation to a property owner up there that uses currently that road that you see going along the top part of that shaded area and looping back is their access to their property. They've been operating on an easement from us, and their suggestion was because there's quite a bit of road maintenance needs to be done, and we've kind of said, look, it's, Ray had said, we're not taking care of our property very well, is the people's name is Myers, it suggests, well, why don't you just sell us that 5.6 acres? And so Ray brought that message home, and then Andy and I have talked since, and Andy, I think correctly, has said, okay, well, we're not spending any money to do that, and we want to make sure we don't have any negative effects on any other property owners that are in the area, and there are some other ones, that we don't incur any planning and zoning restrictions to the rest of the property by breaking off a small piece. And well, actually, that's pretty much it. And you can add something if I've forgotten. But so my idea, and I think Andy agrees as well as Ray, is that we pursue this. The Myerses have agreed to do any surveying and platting that would need to be done to get a market analysis of a fair market value on the property. And of course, you guys would all be able to weigh in before we could make that thing happen. We wouldn't want to survey it up there in 2 foot of snow anyway. So just what I'm asking is, on this particular piece, is do you have, will you give me the head nod that will straighten up a boundary thing? The 5 acres is very isolated, not usable to the river district, not going to change any future enlargement issues on the reservoir. So that's one thing. And then if you could go back to the other slide.
Just on that, I just want to say Tom's accurate in terms of the discussions, and as long as the river district doesn't cost the river district to dispose of the property and the property owner is interested in paying fair market value, I will tell you that it came up because we recognized that some of the neighbors' personal property was collected and growing on our property, and we started having some interactions with the neighbors. And frankly, as a river district, I'd love to clean up. We've got a number of these things up there. We're only going to address 2 today, but there's a bunch of property stuff I'd just like to clean up and not have to come back. Tom said that they had an easement. They actually had a license on a road that comes up for renewal every 5 years. And if they're paying $50 a year and $500 every 10 years, it doesn't cover our costs even in staff time to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I'd really rather just fix this permanently, help the neighbors out, and be done with it as an organization than anything else.
Yeah. With at least 20,000 acres, isn't there?
Yeah, land there 20,000 or maybe 650 an acre. Maybe.
Yeah.
Something in that area.
Yeah.
So the other thing, if you look right in the middle of that slide, the little blue dots, that's about a 50-foot section of River District land from the county road to this other private road that has a dedication for and that's access to 4 people, including the Myers that we were talking about, the property acquisition. That has never been dedicated. That easement is like, well, they don't have the right to go across there. We did do the $50 a year thing 10 years ago, and
How long has that road been there?
What's that?
How long has that road?
That was created during the enlargement.
But we're a government entity, so they can't adversely possess against us. Yeah, we're not very concerned about it.
That driveway predates the enlargement, and in fact, Calcheck has had a license which we renewed in 2018. Myers' license came up for renewal in 2018, but the patriarch of the family passed. And then in researching the license, I discovered that their road came back onto our property. So when the enlargement was done and we granted those initial licenses, represented by the blue line, we didn't realize that their road came back onto us. So that's when we found their stuff on our property. Kraft and Trujillo have never responded to our offers of an access license. They just drive through the gate anyway.
So that's pretty well encapsulates it. So the proposal is, there again to what Andy said, rather than trying to get licenses every 10 years, dedicate that 50 foot to those, as access to those 4 property owners or to that property. And if it changes hands, it still goes with the property. That's my proposal. I'm just asking for a response and a head nod, yeah, go forward, and then next meeting or the next, when we get some appraisals or market analysis and a survey done, a plating, Myers has said, yeah, we're willing to do it. We're not gonna pay for a survey until you tell me that you're willing to sell it. So that's basically why I'm here. So, do I see head nods?
Yeah, sounds
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Munger?
So just a quick, so we continue up in Northwest Colorado to live by Butch Cassidy and Sundance rules. And, so we got wrote up by the water education article you guys probably all saw. And I think the article and the author was a little bit robust, in my opinion, just a little bit. Since then, Aaron, the division engineer, and one of our ranchers had sent in a little bit of editorial. Kind of, we're working on things. We actually spent almost 3/4 of an hour at our last roundtable discussing this whole thing. And, everybody's trying to figure out, there's 500 letters that got sent out by the division engineer. And I think everybody's working on plans to fix them and get measuring devices and get operating devices in place. And the division engineer is also, working with individuals and working with extensions and things on the implementation of it. So
You're actually putting your guns back in your holster.
yeah, we actually, yeah. So we actually didn't.
Don't go Western.
We didn't actually draw the guns, but somebody else started off a firefight. So we're trying to stay out of the firefights as well. So one last quick thing. So I don't know. Somewhere the river district, probably in somebody, we need to have some discussions about water quality as well. So we just got the stretch of Stagecoach Reservoir, which is below the town of Phippsburg, and then includes the Stagecoach Reservoir, that's written up as a 303D, and with lead and arsenic. And so we're a little confused, and I know a lot of other people are working on water quality and 303D listings and the rest. And so I don't know. I've never, as a longtime commissioner, I've never had a lot of good experiences with CDPHE, and they're moving and elevating the bar, so to speak, and without a lot of sound reasoning and science behind that. And I'm uneducated. I'm a hick, and I always said that. But it just seems like a lot of times we raise the bar on these things without valid. So now the Upper Yampas sitting there trying to figure out, is this a concern for us, or is this not a concern? Is it real water? Is it really something we should worry about? And so I guess I'm just making everybody aware that that's happening.
Angie, you had a thought on that?
Do you mind if I say something on that point?
Yeah.
So Angie Fowler with SGM, and along those lines, as a consultant, I've been working on water quality and regulations for my entire career as a consultant, and there's definitely been a shift in the Water Quality Control Division probably taking a closer look and a closer eye with their obligations with respect to what EPA expects from a primacy perspective. So I just wanted to offer, I don't know if you are all familiar with Troy Waters. He's one of our water quality control commissioners. He's the ag representative and he lives in Mesa County, but April Long as well is in our area, and she's one of the water quality control commissioners. And I can offer to come share with you what I know about water quality standards, but I think the commissioners would be really good resources for your next meeting to come in and just give you an update. Director Vandenbrink, I was thinking about the nutrient aspects, and for wastewater dischargers, there's a regulation that is,
And Mike's had a lot of
revised and
experience
being
with Water Quality
implemented,
Control
but
Commission.
where you're discharging that hook really comes into play. And then arsenic, there's a temporary modification statewide on arsenic, and so those that are influenced by an arsenic action and reduction, I was part of a conversation the other day with the division staff, and they said that they highly recommend doing some investigation on identifying where your sources of those pollutants may be coming from. So there's a lot going on, and I find that even though I'm working on this on a daily basis, it's really hard to keep track of. But anyway, I'll stop, and if there's a reality to what you're sensing in these things, there's a need to understand them, and there's some time and investment there to do that because they're resource limited too, but
Thank you.
commissioners, water quality control commissioners, I think they would be good for you to
Thanks, okay,
bring in. Yeah.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Okropeska.
You know, the only concern or comment that I was going to raise, I had the opportunity to bring up just a few moments ago, and that is the perception, certainly in my community, that the River District, some folks perceive the River District as advocating for demand management. And you can understand when the River District stands up in public and explains that the upper basin is going to have to use less water in the future, and then they start talking about demand management. You can understand how people can get that perception. So it's something to really be cognizant of, and I'm certain that we can remedy that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Segelmeyer.
Well, on the water quality front, I can't help but tell this story. In Lake Dillon, we have been working since 1982 under a special, for us, state regulation controlling phosphorus, not nitrogen.
At the P Club there.
And it's been incredibly successful with 3 different wastewater treatment plants. Of course, there's been many, many millions of dollars spent, but we've been working in tandem with the University of Colorado limnology students, monitoring all over the lake and down the Blue River, and reducing septic systems, increasing wastewater treatment. So it's been incredibly successful, and with the intent to not have algae taking away from the clarity of the lake, as well as Denver likes clean water to drink. And it's been so successful that one of the issues we're looking at now is that as the water comes out of the dam in the Blue River, we're not seeing healthy fish because they don't have anything to eat. And the joke with Parks and Wildlife is, let's throw in some fish food, give them some nutrients. But nobody would, and that's a joke, nobody would really do that.
I got a list that probably did.
Parks and Wildlife probably.
No. And so it's an irony because we're saying we need more nutrients to feed the invertebrates, and we've done too good a job at keeping the nutrients out. So, can't win.
More bugs.
Thank you. Mr. Elvey.
We're in Delta County working on a couple of things. We have 2 large construction projects going. One, the RCPP piping project, which is progressing in the mud and snow, but it's the time we got to work on it. And the same with the MOA project on Paonia Reservoir. It's a Bureau-funded project to replace the gates, which brings echoes of what we had to do on Wolford. And it wasn't fun there, and it's not fun on Paonia either, I can tell you. And the weather is not helping much. Those guys are pretty cold down there. But anyway, progress on those fronts. It's good to see the construction. Otherwise, we're also working on a stream management plan for the North Fork, which would be very interesting, and I'll report back because it'd be one of the least likely streams to have a stream management plan on it.
Okay, Ms. Whitmore.
Uray County and Uray County water users and Tri-County got its application filed in December. We're excited about that.
For Ramshorn Reservoir.
And our augmentation plan. We're excited about that. And now we just have to wait and see who objects.
Okay. Very good. Nothing much new to report from Garfield County, except they are, as I reported earlier, they are concerned over the direction of the tax base. I think as many counties are. So we'll see what happens. We have some districts, like a hospital district, rival hospital district, an enormous percentage is oil and gas. And these are things that could be directly concerned in the next few years. So, thank you. I think now we're going to adjourn the regular meeting and go into the Information Outreach Committee. Is that correct?
It is. If we could maybe take a 5-minute break and reconvene, let anybody who's clearing out for this, who's not sticking around for the INO committee, feel free to take off. Dinner